Okay, I'll start my official stuff. Good afternoon. Welcome to DCA's Delta Stakeholder Engagement Committee. Meetings being held via teleconference or Ring Central on Wednesday. Let's see, what was that one? Geez, here we go. Not on Wednesday, February 12th, but on Wednesday, April 22nd. And happy Earth Day, everybody, because I am old enough where I gathered some of the first signatures for Earth Day when I was in college. Okay, so we will have a roll call, please.
Sure. Chair Palmer.
Here.
Chair Keegan.
She's in another meeting, so she'll be late.
Okay, good to know. Committee member Swenson. Is everyone unmuted, Jennifer? Let's see.
Here.
Hold on. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Jasmine.
It's okay. Committee member Whaley.
Here.
Committee member Barbara Berrigan-Perilla. Oh, I said your full name, sorry.
That's okay, here.
Committee member Giacomo.
Here.
Committee member Glosky.
Here.
Committee member Shia.
Here. Present.
Committee member Cosio.
Here.
Committee member Gonzalez Potter. Committee member Cox. Committee member Tarango.
Here.
Committee member Wallace.
Here.
Committee member Mann.
Here.
Committee member Liebig.
Here.
Committee member Lytle. Committee member Moran.
Here.
Committee member Tayaba. Committee member Robertson. So just to make sure I didn't miss anyone, Gilbert Cosio, Isabella Gonzalez Potter, Jim Cox, Dr. Lytle, Melissa Tayaba. Are any of you on the line?
Yep. Gilbert's here.
Yeah, this Gilbert's here.
Oh, thank you. Anyone else I missed?
Jasmine.
Yes.
Sean Worth's on the line too. You didn't call my name.
Oh, whoops, sorry, I needed to scroll down on the list. Committee member Worth, there we go, and committee member Hardesty.
Here.
Thank you.
I think Peter Robertson is also on the meeting.
Yeah, I got him.
Okay.
Okay, good.
I think Sean's looking pretty good there with some facial hair.
Yeah, I get the award for the most feral stay-at-home person.
That grows fast.
Okay.
All right, we have a quorum.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so here's, good afternoon. This is Chair Sarah Palmer. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate the fact that you're taking the time to participate in this process and provide your thoughts on ways we can provide a community focus on the engineering aspects of a proposed conveyance project. Obviously, these are unprecedented times, and I hope that you're all doing well. I would like to make clear for the record that this meeting is being conducted by Ring Central and teleconference pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order N-2920 in response to the COVID-19 state of emergency. The purpose of the SEC is to create a forum for Delta stakeholders to provide input and feedback on technical and engineering issues related to DCA's current activities. The SEC is a formal advisory body to the DCA Board of Directors, and as such, and like the DCA itself, it is subject to the public transparency laws applicable to local public agencies like the Brown Act and Public Records Act. So how public comment is going to be working today, it's a little bit different. We're working to keep our remote meetings consistent with our in-person meetings with presentations and SEC discussion following. However, as noted in the agenda, we're going to do public comment a little differently this afternoon. So public participants in the meeting will be muted except during the public comment period. This period will occur after the conclusion of the staff presentation and SEC questions and comments for all agenda items. If you wish to provide remote telephonic public comment on agenda items, please make sure you email Claudia Rodriguez by 3:15 p.m. Once we get to that point, Ms. Rodriguez will call out each person to speak by agenda item, unmute their line, and allow them 3 minutes to provide comments. We are also accepting written comments, and all written comments should be emailed. Should be emailed to Ms. Rodriguez before the conclusion of the meeting. They will be included in the record of the meeting, but will not be read during the meeting. So we'll follow the same process for public comment on non-agendized items. We appreciate your patience, and we'll be examining ways to provide additional public input during future teleconference meetings. Of course, this is our first time doing it this way, so there might be little glitches. Somebody's in and out, so have a little patience. We'll try to make sure everybody gets heard and appreciated, and that you all get the information you need. Okay, so in order to provide an organized opportunity for SEC members to provide comment without everyone talking over one another, we've asked the SEC members to raise their hand within the Ring Central program, and our moderator, Valerie Martinez, will call the name of each SEC member to make a comment or ask a question. And how you do this, for those of you who may not have done that, if you scroll down to the bottom of your screen, or just hover your mouse over the bottom of your screen where it says participants, click on participants, and you'll see by your name where you can raise and lower your hand. Okay? So for future meetings, at this point, I want to recognize that over the last few weeks, we've received comments from some SEC members about how to proceed. Some have mentioned that they would like to pause SEC efforts until a later date, when the COVID-19 issue is over or at least relaxed. Others want deeper, more focused discussions now about in the design process. So, as a member of the board and as chair of this committee, I will tell you that the BCA values the SEC. The state of California has never seen a process such as this, where we're working together to identify areas where we can find improvements and even community benefits where possible, and that the engineers can integrate into the design up front. So this is new territory. This collaboration sets a new bar for engagement, and we're eager to continue the discussion. That said, there are details that need attention prior to the committee weighing in on dates and topics for future meetings, including the fact that important infrastructure projects across the state, this one included, are not pausing. Frankly, choices about future committee meetings require a thorough discussion, with all members providing thorough input. So for these reasons, we have agendized this discussion as item number 5. By waiting until after the technical discussion, which is item 4, we'll be able to complete the deep dive into the Southern Complex facilities, which will round out our system overview, wherein we've taken each of the components and reviewed their siting. So citing the construction logistics and also the potential future benefits. At that point, we can have an informed discussion about the timing, intent, and opportunities for future meetings. So if that works for everyone, I'd love to see some hands moving or heads moving in consensus. Just, say, yeah, that's okay, let's continue. Is that okay? Would you take a look at that, Claudia, and see how that's going?
Hi, Sarah. So good afternoon, everybody. I've only received one comment via email from Deidre Desjardins for item 4, which is further in the agenda. So I will inform you then.
Okay. So if we get consensus on leaving the agenda as is, I'm assuming we do, unless I hear anything other, then let us ask, and also just as housekeeping, normally around this time I say housekeeping, the bathroom is that way and the exit is that way, but I think you guys know where that all is better than I do, so we'll leave that. At any rate, I'll ask Carrie to address the timing of the CEQA process and the related engineering design. So Carrie, take it away.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
So I guess I'd like to start by just saying it's good to see everyone, even remotely, and I hope that all of you and all of your families are staying healthy. To start this, I'd like to just go over a quick environmental update. The scoping period closed last Friday, and we have started to work to process the nearly 800 comments that we received. Our next step is to develop the scoping summary report, which will summarize the feedback and provide copies of all of the comments received. We plan to post this report on our website when it's finished in about 2 months. Another issue I wanted to touch on, Director Namath Secretary Crowfoot and Governor Newsom received a number of letters requesting that planning or public outreach efforts for Delta conveyance pause during the COVID-19 pandemic. They have indicated that it is important to them to continue critical water planning efforts during this time, including Delta conveyance. However, they also understand the difficulties of public interaction during this sensitive time and that staying healthy is everyone's priority. The public health situation is pushing us to be more creative in our public involvement efforts. We know that all methods of reaching the public are likely to be difficult for some people, so we're trying to use a broad range of options to reach as many people as possible. It is our hope that these methods will help improve communications and open new avenues for engagement. The next opportunity for formal review and comment on CEQA is unlikely to be sooner than early 2021, and in the meantime, we're open to your public engagement ideas, and we'd welcome your input.
Just one moment. I just want to raise that we have two members who are interested, and the chair was saying that in fact there were two kind of options. We can talk about the future topics and timing of the SEC now, or we can talk about it later. And she was looking for consensus. We have two members who have raised questions, Mr. Worth, as well as I think it's Barbara, who was asking, Berrigan, who was asking whether or not this is an issue we can raise now rather than later. So since we have two members who are interested, can we perhaps do a straw poll for a moment just to find out if we want to address it now or later? Perhaps we can do that. And I see Cece also has her hand up. Perhaps we can do that either by voting yes or no, or we can do it, by showing hands, in the screen. I think we're prepared to handle it in either direction.
Well, what we could do then, Valerie, is there is a, if people click on participants, there's a way that they can put yes or no. So yes, continue with the agenda as is, or no, address it now. How's that?
Well, I just want to chime in. If we could just turn on all the mics, maybe for the SEC members, Valerie, and then anyone who wants to make a comment can comment. I have some things I'd like to say to follow up on Carrie's. I can wait till after the comments or before, but we certainly won't start the agenda until people have a chance to speak. If that's all right.
Why don't you continue with your things following Carrie, and then we'll get back to potentially the straw poll. So Catherine, why don't you continue with what that means, what Carrie said regarding potential future meeting topics and implications regarding our commitment to engage stakeholders through this process. So,
okay.
So
yeah,
you address that, and then we'll come back.
All right, and a commitment to make sure that everyone on the SEC gets a chance to speak before we continue on with the rest of the agenda would be great. I'm acting like an SEC member right now, I suppose. So I think, as you all have just heard from Carrie, we've received instruction from the state to continue our engineering work on this important project. So we've been moving forward, and we've completed quite a bit of work since our last meeting in early April, and we've got quite a bit more to share with you today and hopefully in the near future, depending on how we plan to proceed. Regardless of whether you all choose to move forward with us during the sequestering period, the DCA would like to continue to operate in a very transparent and engaged manner. There are quite a number of different ways that we can release engineering information to the public and seek comment. We can do webcasts, post videos on YouTube. We can hold live Q&A sessions, and we also have our monthly board meetings. We usually do the presentations with you all first and then the board, but we obviously can switch that up. But the thing I want to point out is that this group here, I think you guys are providing a service to the public that's immensely valuable, and it's hard to replicate in some of the other forums. In this more intimate setting, we're able to capture the exchange between the engineers and the engineering presentations and the expertise and the passion that all of you have for the Delta. And we are able to make that exchange available to the broader Delta community through the videotape meetings. So whether people are attending meetings live, which are limited, but just the recording of this and having people at their leisure have the opportunity to see it, I think is really important. The questions that you all ask are largely the same questions that the public would be asking, and your understanding of the broader issues in the Delta allow you to predict a lot of what your own constituencies would be thinking about. So there's only a few short months before we're turning in our sort of final documents to Carrie and her team so that they can finalize their environmental analysis. And that plan really isn't changing. So, and personally, I don't believe it should. I agree with the administration that this is an important project to the state. So to me, if we delay the SEC meetings, it only means that there's less opportunity in this type of forum to capture your thoughts and reflect them in the documents that are submitted. And then it'll be the next phase for commenting under the CEQA umbrella that will be available. And during that CEQA comment period, you'll have quite a bit of time to conduct outreach to your constituencies, prepare thoughtful, written, comprehensive comments on the draft DIR document. But as you know, there's a clear demarcation between the work that you all do here in this committee versus the CEQA work and their associated processes. So I don't want to leave you all with the impression that that we're not listening and we're not responding to the concerns expressed by many of the SEC members. To that point, we canceled the second meeting in April and the very first meeting here in May. We've switched to a monthly cadence rather than bi-monthly. And then some of you have commented that it's difficult for you to do outreach in your own community, solicit feedback. And in this case, the DCA can carry a much heavier load there in helping support each of you. We can help host meetings, make our engineers available to your teams. We can, they can review materials in smaller groups that we've presented to date. And as you all may be aware, we've launched our own Facebook page to begin broadening the tools that we use to solicit feedback. So one of the things that we're seeing is the opportunity to engage more people than we have in the past with some of these tools. I think the ability for people to be able to participate from home increases the transparency even of these meetings being online. And it hasn't really escaped me that some of the calls for halts to the SEC meetings have been at meetings utilizing technology to share presentations and express committee opinions and solicit public feedback. So I think we've all demonstrated it can be done. And, you know, technological forms of communication were ubiquitous before this pandemic, and the progression to even greater use of technology, I think, is only accelerated under the pandemic. So I'm not seeing technology really being a limitation for our ability to communicate effectively. And quite honestly, I'm not seeing a time in the near future when a lot of people are going to want to choose to assemble in large groups for public meetings when they can watch and participate from home. But I do understand that for some of you out there, the government restrictions created huge personal commitments and stresses that make it impossible to participate, and we can all empathize with that. If there's anything that we can do to help facilitate your continued participation, we're more than willing to listen and see if we can find a solution. And obviously, if you need to take a break, there are always the videos that are available to watch at your convenience until you're able to rejoin the group. So with that said, I'd like to hand it back to Valerie to help facilitate the conversation before we get started on the agenda. But I do hope that that you all do find a way to continue to give this process an opportunity to demonstrate that we can be effective using this form of communication, and that you choose to continue to share your insights with the broader Delta community through this forum.
Okay, so everyone should be unmuted at this point. If you're muted and you're an SEC member, it's because you muted yourself. So I want to make sure that you're aware of that. I see that we do have some hands up. Let's see.
Whoever's controlling the screen, could you show some folks how to do the hands just by clicking on participants and showing the hands up? Only because I saw some folks asking.
Let me see. It's Jasmine. I might have to let Jennifer take the reins to do this.
Unfortunately, that does not pop up the way that Ring Central.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Just a verbal instruction. If you click on participants, you can either click on your name and raise your hand, or at the bottom of the participants box, you can click on more, and there are options there as well.
because I don't think you want everyone to speak up at once. So I think the hand raise is still the right format.
Right. Well, and the other thing I'm going to note is that we're actually not using the chat as part of this meeting discussion. So it's not even supposed to be activated, but it is. But I need to discourage folks from using it because it's in conflict with the whole Brown Act dynamic. So at this point, if we're not responding, because I'm not going to respond anymore, it's going to be because we're not supposed to be working within chat. I just want to let you know about that. Okay, so in terms of folks with their hands up to discuss this specific issue, David, I know that you had an interest. I know, Sean, you have a specific interest as well. And then I see some other hands up as well. So David, why don't we start with you, then we'll go to Sean, Cece, Barbara, and then Anna.
Yeah, this is David. From my perspective, I'm assuming some of you folks put some time into the agenda, the order of things, and how you'd like to do some things. So I'd defer to that and would prefer to just move on and start getting to the meat of the meeting.
Okay. Okay.
Barbara.
Sean, I know that you have some thoughts on this, so go ahead.
Well, we were originally supposed to do various field trips to take a look at some of the infrastructure, which is going to inform us in terms of both our outreach and our understanding of the project as a whole. We're not going to be able to do that given the current situation. I have a lot of concerns that the ability of the stakeholders to do the adequate outreach to their people is going to be limited as well. And it makes me uncomfortable to think that we've got these people selected as the appropriate people to represent their constituencies, and they're not going to be able to provide the input that they need to. And I get that I don't get that the governor and the higher ups want to make sure this happens right now, given all the other positions that are being put onto us by those very same people. So I guess I'm very confused. Many of us have worked on the conveyance situation for decades or more. So it's not a new project per se. I don't understand what a couple of months off, what negative impact that really had.
Okay. Cece.
Yeah. First of all, technology is not ubiquitous in the Delta. Many do not have access to the internet, do not use the internet. And those that do have a hard time because there's no broadband in the Delta. I cannot hold meetings except in person to reach my people.
Okay, and that I think, go ahead, sweetie.
Also, I seriously question that the governor thinks we ought to push forward at this time. I would like actual communication directly from him saying that, and I'll tell you why. Because in a recent DPC meeting, we were all represented as being for going forward, and that was not true. So I don't trust that statement. I would like to see a direct order from the governor.
Bravo.
Okay, well, two things, and again, we're still trying to maintain everyone takes their turn in terms of speaking. Carrie, I know that there are documents that have been published that address this issue, correct?
So we do have letters from the director as a representative of Secretary Crowfoot and the governor. The letters are talking about the Delta Conveyance Project. I believe, based on what Catherine has been saying, that the future of the SEC is up to the SEC.
Okay. Okay. And so what was your first issue? I'm sorry, Cece, your first issue was about addressing.
Technology is not ubiquitous throughout the Delta, as Catherine mentioned.
Right. Well, and there was an issue about outreach. You were saying that you're having a problem getting to people and talking about that. And I think that's been addressed because I believe I saw some statement related to that. Either Catherine or Nasli, if you want to address the fact that expectation is not currently in the hands or on the shoulders of the SEC. Is that correct?
Well, what we've said is I mean, obviously, some people, it's going to be easier to do outreach than others. And we've got a Facebook page now. We're going to put a comment sheet on there. All of these presentations will be posted. I think there's an opportunity here to get, input from a broader group of people, maybe not the same. So I understand that there's restrictions, but we either live with restrictions or we don't host these meetings. To me, hosting the meetings is a better of two challenging situations.
Mm-hmm.
The meetings can wait till a time that everyone can participate. What I was getting at there was that the technology is, to use your words, not ubiquitous in the Delta. Many people do not even have a computer or the internet. They communicate in person or by phone.
Okay.
And they come on social media and go on the internet to access these meetings. That's why they come in person to the scoping meetings.
All right. Well, thank you for clarifying that, Cece. That's what I needed some clarification on. Barbara, you had comments.
Yes, thank you. First, in terms of reaching the environmental justice community from the Delta, I'm really disappointed in what I heard Catherine's statements were today, especially after giving comment and painting a picture of what is going on at the DCA meeting last week. You can't throw up a Facebook page and expect the community to engage, especially on a project that is so technically difficult. But I am not saying that we should just stop. I think there is a happy medium here. You have taken in a lot of material and questions from us and a lot of recommendations. What we have not seen back is how you're incorporating that into the work so far. We haven't gotten a chart like, oh, that comment, we're incorporating it here, or we're not incorporating it, or we're going to handle it this way. We're going to finish a meeting today from which we can ask questions or talk through the meeting or send written questions later. So I think there's kind of a happy medium here. I think because we still can't do the adequate outreach, and I'm sorry, but for some of my SEC members who think, oh, process is fine, I guarantee you, you're not talking to more than 8 or 10 people. Some of our organizations and some of our groups talk to people in the hundreds and the thousands regularly. And I'm concerned about reaching those people. What we can do is, while you incorporate our responses thus far and what we've given you thus far, when the stay-at-home order restrictions start easing, I'm thinking we could go back on a tour, but rather on a bus, in individual cars. We could use technology with walkie-talkies. I cannot stress enough how important I think it is to do the visual visits, to actually think things through, look at conditions on the ground, and to be able to go back and talk to the groups that we work with and kind of picture what is the best option. Catherine said at the DCA meeting, well, we could take comments anytime later. So why don't we maybe, you said it's a month, that you're going to wait another month for a meeting. I would say 6 or 8 weeks, but maybe there's a halfway point in there. And what I would do after that is not just rush it because you have to get to DWR's deadline for the EIR, but then take us on the tour once we can start getting out in the ground, and then give us a good 6 or 7 weeks after that, because what will happen is, we're going to still be in social distancing, and we're going to be working in limited capacities. I've had to rethink a whole work plan about what in-person meetings are going to look like. At that point, if I have 6 or 7 weeks, I could do very small, safe group meetings with people and provide you with further input. This isn't about delaying the process or just being fearful. This is about us being creative about how to get that information to you. And I honestly think we can do it. It's going to take longer. And what that's going to take from you is a commitment that, okay, our timetables are going to be a little bit off because of COVID, but we could actually get this done closer to what we all originally envisioned.
Okay. Very good. Anna, you have comments.
Hi. So I take this responsibility really seriously, and at this point, besides being an observer, there's not much outreach I can do via the internet. The governor said that there were 1 million kids who didn't have access to remote learning because of internet issues, and I am very sure that a majority of those kids are in areas like where I live. And so if we continue on as normal, what we're doing is those who are affluent and can afford internet will get the information, and those who are not, cannot, who are only using limited resources because of the inequality of broadband here in the Delta, that what will happen is only a certain amount of people, the same people, will get the information, and we're going to lock out a whole other group or groups that equally deserve to be able to have this information, be able to give feedback. I was really interested in the sites. I really wanted to go do that. I hope that we can still go do that. My only other thought is this project, if built, will be built when my daughter is almost 40 and she's 13. What is the rush? You guys, when we went into this, we said that the point is that you guys wanted to do the best job you could do, and that you wanted the input of the people who this project will directly and devastatingly will affect. And then we get to this problem with COVID, which is no one's fault, but we have to be realistic about the way that we can engage with people. I am fully committed to doing what I was engaged with after this is over. I'm willing to do it at a measured rate as we're allowed to come out of the shelter in place order. But as of like this moment, there's no way that I can really engage with folks because they don't even have the internet capabilities to be able to like receive documents. If I tried to send them some of the stuff that you guys sent me, it would be bounced back because of lack of broadband. So I think that if you guys were willing, Santa Clara, you guys should help us get some internet. You take this time to do that, to provide a service and something that, you know, these kids here in the Delta really, really need and would directly benefit your cause.
Sure. Well, and I think one of the issues that's been raised is timeline. Carrie, do you want to hit on timeline? Because I know that that's been an issue that you've been working specifically on. Carrie, you're on mute.
Am I off mute now?
Yes, you are.
Okay, I pushed off mute several times and it was not having it. So, so in terms of the schedule is something where we are trying to move this forward in an expedient manner because we think it's important, and because of the importance of the project, it's important to understand how we want to proceed and continue this planning effort. So it's part of the idea that this is important for the state to continue the planning.
Well, and that said, so our next meeting is set for May
27th.
Yes, and you know, right now I think our shelter-in-place orders are until May 15th. And so what the governor has consistently said is that it's, you know, to use his term, it's not going to be flipping on the light switch, it's going to be more of a dimmer. How many people do we have participating in today's meeting? By the way, Jasmine, do you have a number?
The last I checked was 96.
96.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so that's actually a really impressive number in terms of the number of people who are participating. So, Sarah, it sounds like, you know,
You have 3 more raised hands, is that right?
Yeah, we got Jim, Barbara, and Anna.
Barbara, I think already spoke. Anna already spoke. Jim, I didn't see you. Go ahead.
Okay. Look, I completely understand what Barbara and Anna are saying, and I appreciate that. I mean, we have internet broadband issues in Cortland and everywhere else along the Delta. But I guess the question I want to ask the DCA staff is, are we absolutely dead certain that this project is going to move forward, whether or not this committee remains engaged on the schedule we have now? I mean, that's my impression, right? You're going to move ahead no matter what. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. So I just, given all the other conditions we have, I don't want to get left behind. I don't want my stakeholder groups to get left behind. If this is the best we can do, if it's 50% of great, that's okay with me. And I would like to see these things continue.
I have a comment. Maybe you can answer this. It strikes me that there's no reason why once some of the COVID restrictions are released, that we can't continue with some of the tours and that sort of thing. So I don't think that we should say we can't do these things. I mean, while everything else can continue, the tours we can do at a later date to make sure everybody gets a chance to see that, don't you think?
Yeah, Sarah, I just had a note, I think, who knows and who wants to get on a crowded bus a month from now, 2 months, 3 months from now. We can film each of these sites and include that as part of the upcoming meeting. That's not a problem. We plan to have, as you see in this package, an agenda to do the actual boundaries for each of those sites in a little bit more detail than we had before and give that out as a book. People are free to drive and see them themselves. So I think there's a lot of things that we can do here. But just to be clear, if we have a deadline to hit and we pause, there's fewer SEC meetings to present information. It's just simple math to me. I don't know how else to explain it.
Catherine, would there be other outreach efforts happening if in fact the SEC's not if they hit the pause button?
Well, the same presentations we've been doing for the SEC, I would do for the board, and then we will try to do more YouTube videos and try to get, there's a backlog of information right now that we'd like to get out there, and we use the SEC for that forum. So like I said, there's other methodologies to do that, but I think who loses in that is the Delta, because they don't have the benefit of all of your contribution to that conversation. It becomes, it's more, well, maybe at the board meetings we can get that from the public, but
I think that Jim's comments about not really wanting to be left behind, I think are quite valid, and I think we should.
Yeah, if we want to do mini groups and do separate meetings to help any of the members engage some of their people, we'd be glad to do that. I'm open to any suggestion out there.
Okay, if you're open to any suggestions.
Hold on, we hold our hands, Barbara.
My hand isn't up, I'm sorry.
I know, but so we haven't heard from Philip and we haven't heard from Mike Moran. They both have their hands up. So Philip, you're on mute.
How do I do this? Give me a second.
You're good. We can hear you. We can hear you. And we see you.
You can hear me?
We hear you.
All right. Hi there. Yeah, so hope everybody's doing well. Just to reiterate the point that people have been talking about, it took me 40 minutes here to get my internet strong enough to actually be able to work, be able to be functional with this app. My house is right on the Columny River near Thornton, and I don't have internet, so I actually have one of those Verizon jetpacks. It's been pretty tough. I think the one point that I would add to this general conversation is that while I understand that there have been some directives, potentially from the governor's office, definitely from Wade Crowfoot, to proceed with the engineering planning for this project, if the SEC is considered an outreach opportunity of the Department of Water Resources to pursue engagement with people in the Delta. And it's already been stated that people in the Delta, including myself, have struggles with internet connectivity. The push of the Delta Conveyance Authority and the DWR to continue hosting these meetings, you know, it delegitimizes the meetings in the view of the public. And I think long-term, when historians, and I speak as a historian with degrees in history, I think long-term people in my field, when they look back at this moment 40, 50, 60 years from now, especially when this thing, if it gets built, when it gets built, I think they're going to look at this moment, they'll be like, oh, this is another example of state interests, not necessarily state interests, but potentially, you know, the interests of folks in the Southern Central Valley, in Los Angeles and Santa Clara, treating the Delta as a colonial geography where, you know, they'll listen to us if they can, but they don't really need to listen to us. So, you know, that's my general concern is I think that the lack of access that people have in the Delta to the means of communication that we need to actually participate in these meetings, you know, with force, is a serious problem when it comes to, I guess, political economy, right? Like, I don't see, you know, I for one don't see the vast majority of people in the Delta being able to engage with this. So that's my statement, and I hope everybody's okay.
Thanks, Philip. Okay, Mike, Douglas, and Peter. Okay, Mike.
I think Barbara's idea of hopping into a car and doing our own tour is a great one. Any way we can use some kind of a letter or a document that tells whatever law enforcement or the interested parties as we're driving around, that we can just display as an essential function or something thereof.
Okay. All right. All right. Sounds good. And of course, we're all supportive of each other's comments, right? So, Douglas.
Well, it seems to me that we are now trying to keep up with the timetable with the rest of the process. I think we're in a very unique situation. I think everything should slow down and hold back.
Okay.
So I don't understand why are we keeping, we are now rushing ourselves to keep up with the process. And I just think the whole process should be slowing down.
Okay. All right. Well, and we're going to go to Peter, but right before we go to Peter, just to address that, because there's a theme. I think there might be a misunderstanding that the DCA is moving this process and deciding on what this timetable is, and it's beyond us. And so what we're doing, what the DCA is doing, you know, and what we're doing as a committee here is trying to ensure that there is consistent information going into the process that we're not necessarily controlling the timing on. So I just want to make sure that that's clear, that the DCA is not controlling the timing of the design process. So then it's a question of if in fact the SEC is meeting or not meeting, what happens there is you either have input or you don't have input based on whether or not, you know, because the process is not stalling itself. So if we pause the SEC, that's one thing, but the process itself is not going to stall.
Right.
And
We'll
so,
still provide opportunity for input. We still have the DCA board meeting, and we still have other avenues that are available to all of us. There's lots of organizations that are continuing to seek public input through these tools. We're committed to continue that process. Our due date is not moving. So it's whether or not we use the SEC as the forum for that engagement, in addition to some other more like the Facebook page and whatnot, or we go exclusively to other forums. It's really up to the SEC how they'd like to continue. And I can understand the situation, and I'm fine, you know, obviously with whatever the SEC decides.
okay. Peter, Sean, Barbara, and David Glosky, and then I think we're going to kind of be at that point where most people have people who have wanted to talk, unless there's someone who hasn't been able to speak, raises their hand, because we are getting into double discussions.
Hey, Valerie, this is Carrie. Can I just mention something about the schedule?
Sure.
So I think I just wanted to mention that really one of the things that's come out of this pandemic is that it's made all of us very aware of how vulnerable our systems are and how we must be prepared to address emergencies in any form. And that's part of the reason that we as a state want to take the appropriate steps to protect our water supplies and responsibly engage in efforts supporting this lifeline now instead of later. So our underlying reasons for studying this project, including the threat of climate change, sea level rise, and flashy storms, will not pause for a pandemic. So we're planning to forge ahead, and we want to do that collaboratively to protect those resources. So I just wanted to give a little bit of explanation about, we keep talking about the schedule, and that is why we think this is so important that we keep moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Peter.
Thank you, Valerie. Getting back to changing some of our outreach techniques because we can't talk to big groups as we were before. We would go to yacht clubs and things and we would talk to the whole membership at their monthly meeting. Worked very well. If we're going to have small meetings and you're going to provide some outreach speakers, and I've done this before with closing some military bases and things like that. I mean, sometimes it's people's living rooms where we're talking to 5 neighbors, if you will. Will you, and how quickly can you put together a speaker task force to be able to go out and do this? And will they be able to work evenings, daytime, weekends, to come out and do this and have a variety of media when you're doing this in some facilities? Some of them have great audio visuals. In other words, they don't. So you have to bring a flip chart, if you will. That's what we're really up against now, where we were before. A lot of the facilities that I used up until 6 weeks ago are now flat, locked down, closed, empty. All right. And so it's difficult to do that, to find a space where you can have a group of people, small group of people at that, because people, no matter when we get the all clear, I will tell you from having dealing with these type of things in the past, people are going to be gun shy to get together because we've been adamant about telling them not to be.
I agree. Obviously there's some people here that are local, but just like, you know, a lot of other businesses, we've got a lot of people working on this team that are remote to Sacramento. So they're working from their homes and aren't here local. As long as the rules that are in place around who's allowed to gather and who's not, if you need help from the DCA to help support your ability to speak to your constituencies, you've got 100% support from us. I mean, I don't know about you, but Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday doesn't look any different than Saturday or Sunday to me. So whatever you need, that's what that's kind of what I'm talking about. If you need us to host Ring Central calls for constituencies, we'd be glad to do that. If we have technology back in our office, giant screens that we can roll out, and as long as we have power, there's a lot of presentations that we can do and spread people out in a room. As long as this is all legal under county rules, we'd be glad to support you.
Great. All right. First, I do want to recognize that our co-chair, Barbara Keegan, has joined us. She was she had a conflict, so she is now joining us. Welcome, Barbara. We have Sean, Barbara, and David Glosky. Sean.
A quick question and then a comment. The question is, we've heard due date and deadline several times. I'm not aware what our due date or deadline is. I'd like some clarification on that. Then in response to Carrie's suggestion that we need to take care of this important thing during the pandemic, we're looking at one potential solution of those problems. We're not looking at any of the other potential solutions. So I don't know if that's really a fair statement.
Okay. All right. And Barbara.
Same question. What is the DCA's deadline? 50% is not good enough. I think in doing this for probably the second most expensive and largest infrastructure project in California. We have fought for years to be included in the process. And we want to bring the community together to answer the questions for this. So we are not looking at a slowdown without providing input. What we're just saying is we've got to follow through. Maybe we can do some driving now, but that's the videos that are being talked about are not the same as going out on the ground and actually being able to talk to a representative. So I would go back to using some type of technology with social distancing out on the ground to look at the sites physically in person. We're not asking for a delay. What we're saying is if it takes 8 weeks longer to do it right through the SEC, let's do it right.
Okay, so let's just, I personally, I think this meeting is working right now. Let's keep these things going and get as many of these as we can. And then we'll figure out how to do this tour. It won't be a bus. Maybe you all drive your personal cars.
Yeah.
We give you, we bring a microphone and you guys all have headsets so you can hear with the distancing. There's lots of ways that we can try to tackle this. As long as we're not doing anything illegal under the county or state requirements. These are fine examples of ways that we deal with a new world order.
And the thing is, then just give us the time to do with your people some of the social distancing meetings after that. We have to just, yeah, that's what I'm doing. And the last thing is you're double counting participation on these calls because people are using video and calling in on their phone.
Okay.
We're going to take credit. We're grabbing it. I see a number, we're grabbing it, Barbara.
Catherine.
You do the same thing and you know it.
To be frank, it almost sounds, I mean, again, I think everyone's kind of, my facilitator hat's totally coming out right now because it really sounds like a lot of people are saying the same thing. No one is saying that they don't want to do outreach.
Right.
The question is, how do we do it? And how do we get creative? And what does that timeline look like? And how do we do it efficiently but good, right? Yeah. Efficiently but good. And so, it doesn't sound like anyone's saying overtly. I mean, they may be saying it, but it's not necessarily, it's not about stopping or pausing SEC. It's about engaging the SEC, the DCA's toolkit of tactics to get out there and actually start talking to people in a different way.
Yes.
And so, it definitely sounds like we continue moving forward. We do so in tandem. We do so in a way that ensures that information continues to fold in. We find new and innovative ways of pushing information out and receiving input from our folks. The good thing is that, again, Barbara, you're really hitting this point hard about the creativity and the focus. Yes. And so, I mean, we may want to do a couple of just, sidebar meetings to pick your brain and figure out some thoughts on perhaps how we do that. And that maybe that'll be one of those rounds of calls that I sometimes make so that we can have some of those conversations. Maybe Nasli and I'll double team and do some of those or something along those lines so that we can see where those pockets are that we want to hit. The next SEC meeting is another month away. Again, we'll continue to move this forward. We don't intend to double count, but at the end of the day, what we want to continue doing is continue pushing out information. And whether, and we want folks to continue, I think, as the SEC wants to continue to engage and provide input into the process, because that's the whole goal. That's why the SEC members are here. You guys is that kind of where you're going?
I'm 100% with it. So that's why I'm saying this whole thing about this rush or this deadline, it's just, we're going to continue doing it. I'm not saying skip pieces, but it's just going to take longer if you're going to add this onto the back end. And the last thing is, I really want to see some feedback from you where we're a little bit slower about what we're saying, where and how it's getting incorporated so we can track that.
Yep. Well, ironically, I think that's actually one of our agenda items today, whether we're going to say, you know, the SEC said this, and here are some of the nifty things we're doing in terms of, the DCA is going to say these are some of the nifty things we're doing in order to accommodate that. So the great thing about this conversation, and then I'm gonna go to David Glosky to cap this off, because he did have his hand up, is that it sounds like we really have come full circle through this discussion. That again, the commonality is that everyone understands that there's a need to have stakeholder engagement discussion in a meaningful way, which is this committee has been able to do. With the SEC, there's a desire to ensure, with the DCA, there's a desire to ensure that the DCA is hearing it, right? So you want to see the 1 + 1 = 2, right? But we also need to be mindful that we need to be a little more creative. The DCA needs to be more creative in terms of how they're pushing out information and receiving feedback. And again, as Catherine was saying, the nifty thing is there's a Facebook component now. There might be some webcasts. As Peter was saying, you know, if we can get kind of a speakers bureau going, you know, Catherine doesn't sleep, so I'm sure, or take days off, so I'm sure just fine. It sounds like we have, you know, found a good place to settle. David, do you want to close this out?
Yeah, from my perspective, it looks as though the schedule is not going to be, you know, changed. So Catherine's made it clear. I'm sure she's got targets to hit, and she's running a project, and it's moving along. And as a person living here in the Delta, in this area, you know, means a lot to me. I want to have as much input into this project as I possibly can. And I think this DCA process is really good. You know, maybe it needs to evolve. I do have a Facebook page that I put up to disseminate information and some of my points of view to my constituents. I know it went out. I do hit up the yacht clubs, Discovery Bay Yacht Club and the San Joaquin Yacht Club, as well as the Bethel Island site. I think a lot of the 98 participants on here are some people that I've got on this call because there's a couple of issues that are really important to us. And they're texting me saying, you know, when are we going to get to the stuff that we're on here to talk about? So, I mean, I would like to see us go forward so that, and I'd like to see that, I think this is an example also of using this technology to get more participation of people in the Delta that, you know, need to have their words heard.
Great. Perfect. What a great way to close this out. I truly, I think that this created a nice dialogue where perhaps we can find some space. Again, I think there's still a little work that needs to be done. We can have some offline conversations about creative ways of talking to individual constituencies. The DCA, from my understanding, is definitely interested in moving forward in that direction, and we've heard similar things from DWR. So we'll have that conversation. I know Josh, our lawyer, is voting right now.
I'm being ignored.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I'm
what?
sorry. I had my hand up. I wasn't called.
Oh, Karen, I'm sorry. I did not see your hand. Hold on one moment. Where did you go? That's Karen, right? Speaking, Karen, go ahead. I apologize again. We're still navigating this dynamic. So on occasion, some, you know, we might not see something. So please go ahead.
I realize my hand is not large. Anyway, I have three points here. First of all, I hadn't heard yet the actual dates of the DCA deadlines. I know 2 or 3 people asked for that information, and so I'm hoping we can hear that before this call is over. That's number one. Number two, I'm kind of curious as well, and I heard somebody else ask the same thing. How has our input thus far been enacted or included or considered? We haven't heard any feedback. That's number two. Number three, perhaps there is a way that you can help. I know Catherine has mentioned several times that she would like to just do anything to give us a hand. Fine. If the governor says that we can operate and we're moving forward on the tunnels and it's okay and business as usual, then perhaps small businesses can get back to work. Maybe it's time to open up the doors and turn on the light switches in spite of what everybody wants, so that those that want to work can, and those that want to assemble can take that chance. Anyway, that's how you can help us, is find out from the governor how much he's believing in us. Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you. Good discussion. As I was just going to say, if I know Josh Nelson, our attorney, his head is exploding right now because what happened in this discussion is that we moved into item 5. And so, Sarah, would you say that we officially handled item?
I would say we officially have gone through to item 5, which is not my intent, but there we go. So we're there. So as chair, I'm saying, okay, we're gonna wind up item 5. Valerie, would you please wind up item 5 for us?
Okay.
So Valerie, we do have one public comment on item 5. When you're ready, it's Deidre Desjardins.
Thank you.
All right, Deirdre.
Hello?
You're on. You're on.
So two things before, Deirdre, before you start, I'm going to note that some people may have video and in fact may have their phone. You need to mute one because otherwise we get feedback and we get echoes. So just throwing that out there. Deirdre, go ahead. You have 3 minutes and I think you're muted, Deirdre. Deirdre?
Just a minute.
Do you want to make a comment afterward?
No,
And I think you have more than one.
Yeah. So can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay. So I just switched on the computer audio. So
Okay, go
I
ahead.
wanted to.
You have 3 minutes.
The schedule, I'm concerned about the engineering schedule. We submitted comments to begin with in June of 2019 that you were going forward with this project on the original water fix engineering schedule, which was to complete the final design in 3 years. And I'm concerned that you're still going forward on that schedule. And I don't think it's enough time to incorporate or consider new design information or to incorporate community feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
All right.
Moving forward, the other element to consider as part of item 5, by the way, is topics for discussion. So I think because of the amount of time that we've taken, Catherine, can you hit that kind of quickly so that maybe people can email you some thoughts on topics to come up over the next handful of meetings?
Well, I can tell you today we hadn't finished the southern facility, so we're going to spend time on that today. I also, at the last meeting, it was when we first got some substantive comments about moving things. Prior to that, we hadn't, I mean, except for the intakes, and I can appreciate the comments around the intakes, and we expressed our opinion that a lot of the intake locations were driven by regulatory requirements. But we got substantive comments that we could actually respond to by physically moving things, or at least showing some maps to demonstrate why things would move. So we're going to start that conversation today. A couple of comments from the members triggered that I'm going to go back through all of the comments in the database and see if there's anything else in there that would benefit from being added to a presentation. So you'll see in the agenda, there's about 6 items from the last meeting that I wanted to comment on. We also have an agenda item for people to add some additional comments from that last meeting. Next meeting, we're going to have the regional traffic model completed and presented, and we'll also have the regional air quality mapping done. And we're also going to have the booklet of the final site boundaries for every site, which I think would be a great companion to this driving tour. So that's what's in the works for May. The June and July meetings were going to be based on going back through the record of all the questions and comments and making sure that we're capturing all of those. So we've gone through each of the individual facilities, and we'll have covered the major impacts And then what the following meetings will just be making sure that we sweep up everything else that's been recorded in the database. So there's not a specific agenda for those meetings in June, July. So
okay. So if in fact you have some sort of question, issue, something you've always wanted to understand better about this project, how it works, obviously we're talking about engineering design.
Yep.
Components. I would say, go ahead and email us some of those thoughts, and we'll see what we can do to either raise those specifically or fold that information into another pre-existing presentation to ensure that we're hitting that discussion.
Yeah, we're able to answer nearly all the questions. The ones that are tripping us up just a little bit are the ones that require geotechnical data that we just don't have right now. But otherwise, I think we're at a point now in the work that we can answer a lot more of those questions. So it'll be going back and scrubbing through all that.
Perfect.
But I think, today's presentation, I think, demonstrates the starting to that process of incorporating feedback from people back into the documents.
Great.
Okay, so one thing I would like to do right now is let's get back to the agenda. We've gone over the future agendas, so that item 5 we've gone over. So we're getting to agenda item number 3. And agenda item number 3 is the minutes review. Does anyone have any changes or comments or questions about the minutes? And note that you have until Friday to make adjustments by sending those to Jasmine Runquist. Anybody have any questions or comments about the minutes? Okay, minutes approved.
I'll note that we are going to be making an adjustment. We just got a comment from Mr. Tarango that he wanted to make some adjustments. So I'll just put that out there in case anyone's reviewing the minutes.
Okay, good.
We have a hand raised as well, Valerie.
Alrighty. Barbara.
Just for the record, because we had an email exchange on this, the last meeting, because I was already sheltered in place, you got email comments and you're going to work that into future minutes.
Correct.
So thank you. Okay.
Thank you for raising that. All right, Sarah.
Then let's continue on to staff presentations. And so Catherine, you're going to make the staff presentation for the next agenda item. It's item number 4. So Catherine, go for it.
Okay. All right. So like we do in all of our meetings, I wanted to start with if the committee members had any specific comments. I know it's been a while since our last meeting, but as a reminder, at the meeting in early April, we showed you the proposed sites and the logistics improvements to get to those sites for both the central and the east alignments. The group had quite a few comments during the meeting that were recorded, and we have those in our database, and you've seen the response to those. We received some follow-up comments, so thank you for those who emailed it afterwards. But if there's any more comments on that previous meeting, please feel free to express them now and use the hand raise. I would like to note that I received a substantial list of comments from a Miss Jan McCleary, who I believe Karen Mann had been in contact with, and I appreciate that, and we're going to be following up with her on the response. We'll also enter all of her questions into our database, and we'll share the response in this group. So I'd appreciate it if you limited your comments to the content of that March presentation, and then with that, just please raise your hand, and Valerie, if you could facilitate calling on people, that'd be great.
Sure. We do have David Glosky. If you have questions.
So yeah, Catherine, can we talk about the Bolden Island barge landing?
I have that in the list of questions. Do you want to wait till we get to that and talk about it?
That's fine.
Okay, good.
All right. Anyone else? Nope. I think we're good to go.
Okay, let's go. So the next topic on the agenda is some of the responses to comments from the last meeting. I thought there were a couple of them that would benefit from going through with all of you with a set of graphics rather than dealing with in the written response. These are the 6 issues that I had plucked out of that last meeting. Again, this isn't to imply that that we didn't respond to all the questions that that were asked and answered. But these, I think, I'd like to go through some slides with you if you don't mind. Here we go. Glanville. So there was quite a bit of discussion on what it is that we leave behind from these sites. So so I wanted, do I have this? Yeah, okay, sorry about that. Okay, so I wanted to start with Glanville Tract as an example of the discussion. This is one of the major sites, and hopefully this provides some food for thought on some follow-up work that we'll do in the next meeting. So this slide here shows the full utilization of the Glanville Tract. If you recall, this is a launch shaft site. And we selected this site because of its proximity to a rail spur. And by using that rail, we're going to be able to do get the tunnel liner segment traffic off of I-5, and we'll be able to use it to move RTM material around the Delta. So we really liked the reduced effects of this site. And then the launch shaft was on the other side of I-5, and we had the idea of a conveyor to link the RTM production from the launch site over to the Glanville site, where we could process it, sample it, process it, dry it, and stockpile it. And in a lot of that material will swing to the south down to the southern forebay to help build up the embankments. So when we talk about what'll be left behind, obviously the launch shaft will stay as an access point for DWR. So you'll see here in this slide the access roads and the launch shaft site there, which would remain a DWR facility. But we've got this space over here that was used for the RTM work, and that will have been disturbed during our construction. We understand that there's been quite a bit of feedback from mostly from the agricultural community. We've seen it in testimony that if there's a substantial amount of compaction and activity that takes place on the site, it wouldn't necessarily be able to go back into productive agricultural use. So some of the things that that we'd like, just not necessarily specifically to this site, but if there's advice that the SEC members would like to provide to the DCA and to DWR at this meeting about what you'd like to see in terms of the leave behind on these sites. In this particular site, you've expressed an opinion that leaving the rail spur behind would not provide any benefit to any of the industry here in the Delta. There is a need for a significant amount of borrow material for the reclamation districts, and this could be a site where reclamation districts could come pick up borrow material. Certainly we wouldn't need this entire site for that. It would be a much smaller footprint than what's shown here. We understand from recent calls to Port of Stockton, they run a facility similar to that in the South Delta with dredge material. So I really just wanted to use this slide as an opportunity to get you all thinking about input on the leave behind in some of these affected sites. And if you had any comments in particular on this site. You can use your raised hand there if you had anything you wanted to add here.
You know, hands.
No hands? Okay.
Ah, there they are. They're up.
There they go.
All right, David.
Is there on Highway 5 anything that's like a gateway to the Delta or intro to the Delta, area for people traveling up and down High-5 to make it a stop or make it an exit or an intro point to the river and what goes on in the area?
Like a visitor center?
Yeah.
I'm not aware of one, but.
Oh, maybe that's something that could be done there.
All right.
Okay. Right. So next slide here.
Hold on, we do have two more questions now.
Sure.
They marinated. Karen, and then Barbara. Karen, you're not, you are still muted. Karen?
I'm here now. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Regarding the visitor center, that's a great question. I know Ken Stediger, I think I said his name correctly, is trying to put one together at the corner of Highway 12 and Highway 160 to disseminate information about the Delta from that central location. So that might be a thought.
Great.
Thank you.
Now, as far as this is concerned, I do have a quick question for you, Catherine. Do the property owners, the current property owners, where the proposed work will be worked on, the shafts, access roads, etc., do the property owners get easement, or do they get fees for reimbursement for the loss of use of their land?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this land would have to be purchased as part of the project, and obviously there would be, there are processes in place for that.
Has that already started?
No, not at all.
Okay.
That's a ways down the route.
Thank you.
All right, we have Barbara, Barbara, and then Mike, and then Douglas.
It would, building on what Karen said, and then one other point, it would be great if there were smaller satellite visitor centers that could work in conjunction with the center that Mr. Stediger has been working so hard to try to pull together. There are many entry points into the Delta, so we should have multiple entry points into access for visiting in the Delta. But also, I'd like to add that if you cannot return land to productive agricultural use, it has to be accounted for, because that's revenue lost into the counties, into the property tax base, and into revenue bases.
Yep.
I would like to suggest that as much of that land gets turned back into habitat that is compatible with a natural delta as possible. And because these sites could, if you tie it to a center, opportunities for just biking and trailing with that kind of habitat restoration would be ideal. There's going to be a lot of impacts from construction, so let's try to use it to restore as many species as possible.
Yep. Okay.
All right, Mike, how's your mic doing over there, Mike? Are you mute? Mike's having a tough time with his mute button.
We're leaving everybody on, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Mike Moran, are you good to go?
No, can't hear him. He's unmuted.
Yeah, it shows he's unmuted.
Okay, work on that, and we're gonna go to Douglas, and then we'll come back to Mike. Douglas, you two are muted. Douglas, you're
2,
muted.
3, and 5. So what's happening? Hello?
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. We have the intake 2, 3, and 5. So where are 1 and 4? I mean, why aren't there intakes 1 and 4?
I think the preferred intake locations that were included in the NOP were intakes 2, 3, and 5, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, but then are there intakes 1 and 4?
Right, there were in the previous analysis, but the NOP did not include those in the study. So DCA is working off of the NOP boundary conditions.
Okay, all right. Okay, just one more thing is, I think the entry point of the Delta would be the Freeport near the consumer.
I'm sorry. I think you broke up there. Can you?
Consumnes, yeah. Okay.
Okay. Okay, good. And I see that Dr. Lytle is here. So Mike, have you been able to come up? Mike. Okay, so we're gonna go to Dr. Lytle, and then Anna.
Good, good afternoon. Just one question regarding this Franklin Boulevard site. I'm just wondering if you've been able to determine how you're going to accommodate flood control risk for that property, particularly along the Twin Cities Road over I-5 and further to the west.
Yeah, if we go back to this slide here, you see the ring levee around the perimeter.
Okay. And just so you know, during the 1986 flood, I-5 at that location flooded.
Big time.
Okay. And then Anna.
So as we know, the Delta Protection Commission is working on the National Heritage Area, and I feel concerned that they are not being consulted or, you know, made a priority on decisions like visitor centers, since that sounds very much like what the heritage area has been assigned to as duties. So my suggestion is that we don't live in a bubble and we realize that there's other things that are happening in the Delta that coincide with the planning of this project, and that we should really be making sure that it aligns with things that they have planned, or you know, wouldn't it be silly to have two visitor centers on top of each other because you didn't talk to the agency that is overseeing it? Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to try to keep pushing through here. Maybe try to hold questions maybe to the end on some of these. Maybe take one or two on each side if we could. And just, if we can't get through this just a little bit faster. I know we got a long agenda here. And I think the star of the show is really going to be the southern facilities. We got a lot of feedback at the last meeting about the use of Hood Franklin Road. So we went back, and what we are proposing here is to use Hood Franklin Road for the alternative that we've done that uses intakes 2 and 3. If you recall, at the 6,000 CFS, which is the proposed project in the NOP, we'll need 2 intakes, and that means intakes 2 and 3 or 3 and 5. So based on the proximity of each of these, we've presented an option to use Lambert Road exclusively for the 3 to 5 option, and then use Hood Franklin for the intakes 2 and 3 alternative. And that's really just to reduce the amount of additional haul road that we need to run from Lambert up until 2 and 3. So here's an alternative here that pushes the construction traffic to the intake sites through Lambert Road. And what you're seeing here on this map is the overlay of Stone Lakes National Refuge into the area. So this is reflecting comments that we got on the use of Hood Franklin. Any questions?
Yeah, I have my hand
John
up.
has his hand up, yes.
Okay.
I talked to the Friends of Stone Lakes and to the Stone Lakes managers, and the north-south roads are really very, very environmentally damaging for the refuge. There are birds foraging on both sides of that haul road, the entire length. It's going to dramatically affect the ecosystem services of that preserve for listed species. The Hood Franklin Road stuff, that's not great, but it's already an existing road. Having a dirt track with lots of use inside the preserve is really very damaging. It's already a very constrained refuge. Already has lots of other issues. It's not great to impact it any further.
So the haul road that we're putting on the outside of the boundary, you think is problematic?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
The orange road and the yellow road, going north-south.
The 2 haul roads that are solid.
Yeah.
Do you see another route that we could take to get to these intake sites that might be less impactful?
No,
Okay, all right.
I don't, but we need to figure out some way to address the rather extraordinary impacts on a really important part of our preserved ecosystem.
So that would drive, I mean, that would drive traffic onto 160 as a result. You'd come in to 160 and then use the existing 160 route to get to these two locations.
Right, and what we end up with is a situation where it's either the locals take it on the chin or the species take it on the chin. And I mean, I have enormous sympathy for the locals. I don't think it's fair that they have to have their roads clogged up. But that being said, if we focus it from the species perspective, it's not good for them.
What about splitting it? Does that reduce the effects on both sides, or is it all or nothing?
Anything we can do to reduce the length of those roads would help.
Okay.
Splitting is better than not splitting it, for sure.
All right, got it. Okay, next slide, and David, you had some comments on here. I just wanted to give you some background here on what was driving the location of the barge landing. The map that you see here is Bolden Island, and it's the overlay with the colored uses for the site were presented at a Metropolitan Water District Board meeting. You know that they own the site, and these were plans that they had for the island, potential plans for the island as part of the old water fix. Obviously, we've changed the location of the shaft site in our scheme here, but the reason that the barge landing was off of the San Joaquin was that that area right there along the San Joaquin was considered prime habitat potential area, and is a really great site for habitat mitigation as part of the program. So we had shifted it inland to ensure that that land still stayed available for that purpose. And Eric, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, but I just wanted to give you all some feedback from us on how the barge landing had ended up in that location.
Yeah, I think that you covered it pretty well, Catherine. I just, as a reminder, none of this is done yet for this phase of the project, but we did consider the idea that if we want to use any of this for tidal marsh habitat, that corner that's on the San Joaquin is that we could use to mitigate effects elsewhere. The rest of the island, based on fish presence, we couldn't move that to another part. It would need to be on the San Joaquin.
So my comments are, it just seems absolutely insane to destroy a very natural, habitat-rich, wildlife-rich area in order to do a project to try to get, a natural, wildlife-rich area. So I don't know exactly what the tidal marsh is, but barges, and that I've talked with even some. There might even be one on the call here today. A person who had a career in driving things up and down San Joaquin, who said, even going into Potato Slough is just not logical depending upon the size of barges that you are, because it's not very deep and it's windy in there. So it's a beautiful area. There's lots of wildlife in there. Barges, I would think, would want to be out on deeper water, out on the San Joaquin. And I don't understand how you take the tidal marsh and move it down a little bit, and on the south side of this island, just stretch it across the bottom and leave yourself an avenue to get access to, a barge landing out on the river. I got to believe there's ways to move this around to make this work. And I mean, does the shaft itself, could it move, to the west a little bit? That would even make it closer to a barge over on that side?
Yeah, it's really not based on where the shaft is. It's really based on, I mean, we moved as close to the San Joaquin as avoiding that tidal marsh area, but we'll go back and I just wanted you to see where the foundation was for that location. But we'll take that comment under advisement.
Yeah, I see that. And, in terms of touring around and seeing sites, it might be worthwhile for people to see the site of what's out there. And when you see it, whether you think a big barge landing in the middle of it would be wise.
Okay. We have Barbara, Karen, and Anna, do you have specific questions about this slide? Or yes? Okay, Anna, go ahead.
Okay, so on this slide, I'd like to know what regenerative ag means. And on the previous slide, I would like to know what the difference between private ownership and owned in fee title is. Can you explain to me, and even what cooperative agreement, conservation agreement? So the Stones Lake, I'd like to know what on the legend, what each of those actually represent. Thank you.
That's directly off of Stone Lake's website. I'm no expert on land uses, but I know OSHA probably knows a lot about it. So if you want to follow up with her after the call, I think she could answer those questions for you. Don't mean to put OSHA on the spot, but you did bring that up in an email that you sent us about using the right maps.
Okay, and then the regenerative ag, what's that, Catherine?
Again, this map is just the purpose of this map is to talk about this tidal marsh area. This is an older map from the water fix, but Carrie did want to try to preserve that location in there for the mitigation and tidal marsh construction. The rest of this is going to be subject to change based on the relocation of the shaft.
Great. All right, Karen, Cece, and then Gil.
And Barbara.
And
Thank
Barbara. Oh, there you are, Barbara. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Go ahead, Barbara. Actually, you were next. Yes.
Oh, thank you. Quick question on the land height on Bolden Island. I think this is an area with a lot of subsidence, and if I remember, there's a lot of weight in the launch shaft areas, if I recall.
Correct.
So I guess I'm just going to look for more details on potential for flooding and how well that land would hold up as we go along. That's all. Thank you.
Right. Yep. Karen, Cece, and Gil.
Okay, a couple of questions from me. First of all, that's that's known as Little Potato Slough, the actual waterway, and it's a very active area for anchorage, fishing along the shoreline, other water sports, water ski, knee boarding, etc. So families have been using that waterway, that stretch of waterway, as long as I can remember. I know that we've been on that waterway for the last 45 years. So just FYI, you're going to get a lot of angry, very angry people. But I have a question about the barge landing itself. So what happens on the barge landing? I know the barge lands there, but what happens on the land side of the barge landing?
So what we're trying to do is, because of the need to deliver liners to this location, to relieve Highway 12 of that traffic, this barge landing would almost exclusively be used to bring the concrete liner segments in. So what you'll see is on the land side, there would be a crane that reaches over and is able to extract the liners from the barge landing and bring them onto probably a truck that then drives it over to the launch shaft site where it'll be stored, and then it'll be shifted into the tunnel as the tunnel progresses.
So you have a noise factor that will be involved in that, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, as much noise as a crane might make at a construction site, that's the typical amount of noise, and the amount of noise that the barge coming in would make. So yeah.
So, but I would like to point out that on waterways, noise travels further than it does on land. So
yep,
the people who live, if you look where it says McCollum River,
yep.
So you've got North Course Pirate Lair. That's a marina there, and there's actually a mobile home park there that people actually live in 24/7, 365. And then their homes right along San Joaquin River, so they're going to be affected by the noise. I'm not even talking about the recreation people and the boats anchored out right there. I believe that area is called the Bedrooms, and it's been a very famous anchorage location for people with boats who don't want to harm the environment. My other concern is having trucks of any weight compromising the levee. The levee going along.
No, we'll reach over it. We won't.
You'll traverse completely across it, make
correct. Yeah. Well, no, we would reach over the levee to the material and bring it up over the levee and onto the island and take it over to the site.
Oh, no, wait a minute. I'm confused. So the barge will bring the dirt there or the muck there. Is that right?
No. The barge is there to bring the tunnel liners there.
To bring the tunnel liners. How do the tunnel liners get to that barge landing?
Right. So we barge it from either, and you'll see this on another slide here. It gets barged in along the San Joaquin River. A barge pulls up to the landing, and then we'll have cranes and lifting material on the island side that lift it up from the barge up and over the levee and onto the island.
And then it stays there till another barge comes and picks it up?
Yeah, I can't remember how many barge trips a day. We'll have that all in next month's presentation, but it's also the number of barge trips a day to get to the site is in your pack from, I don't know, 3 meetings ago. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's a couple a week, 2 or 3 a week, if I recall.
And this is by way of the central route. Is that
This
correct?
only is needed for the central route. This would not be used for the eastern route. That's
Can
correct.
we just scrap the central route because it's going to go right through our recreation area, and you're going to make a lot of enemies. I'm just telling you that right now.
Yeah, that all will get assessed as part of Carrie's environmental analysis, and your comment is noted.
There you go. All right.
I just want to make sure that you're aware that people actually live right on the McCullough.
Oh, when I put this chart together, I was eyeing what that community is over there along the McCullough River, thinking I would like to live there.
Well, it is a nice little spot, and
it looks
many of us
nice
like to hang out there and boat there. So.
Yeah, I bet. Thank you, Karen.
All right, Cece, Gil, and David. I think we're just trying to wrap up this slide. Cece.
A couple of questions. When will the biological surveys be done for Bolden Island? And where are you going to get the borrow fill for the tunnel shaft mound on Bolden?
Yeah, we're planning on using the Glanville site for material to bring over here to help build the first pads that we'll need.
You're aware that Bolden is 17 feet negative elevation?
We sure are.
All righty.
It poses immense challenges from an engineering perspective.
And the levees on the south side are very fragile.
Yep.
All righty. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Gil and David.
Yeah, my comments also about the tidal marsh area. I recognize this from the water fix. You might want to check on the volume of material that you're going to need to raise that ground to reach that tidal marsh elevation. Like the previous speaker said, it's at least -17, probably closer to -20 a lot of that area. Yeah. So you're talking about several million yards. And if you're going to need 7 million for your 4-bay levee, you may run out of material. I think the original thought was there'd be so much material coming out on Bolden, they could fill that up and not have to take it anywhere. So I'm going to check your math to see if you have enough material.
Yeah, Bolden definitely will be a launch shaft site heading to the south, and Glanville will be heading towards this island. So both of these sites will be sites that will be producing substantial amounts of RTM.
Right, but if you're getting 10 million, 11 million yards of RTM coming out and you need 7 million for your 4-bay levees, you may run out of material if you're going to fill this up.
Okay, thanks.
All right, and David Glosky.
Yeah, my question was going to be with the RTM coming out. So you were saying the barge was just used to bring in the tunnel segments or whatever, but where is the RTM going?
We're still working on the RTM balance, and we're hoping by the next meeting when we show you the final construction and final finished, we'll have an answer for you on that.
So the plan was that you'd use it right on the island, basically, to raise the island up.
Exactly. I mean, it's going to be easier for us. I mean, especially with the sensitivity around barging here. We know that we're going to need some more RTM material down at the southern 4-bay to build the embankments. We're not going to get enough out of that tunnel heading north. We think it's easier for us to swing material by rail from Glanville to get what we need there. So then the question becomes, what do we do with excess RTM here? One of the ideas is this becomes a stockpile site for the reclamation districts to take that material. During construction, it may have sunk fairly low into the ground, as we know these are soft soils here. So those are some of the things that our engineers are still working through. But this could be a site for reclamation districts to get some of the excess stockpile, depending on how the numbers end up at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that would be a great location because it's central, but it also mean that the barge landings used for more than just the tunnel segments, right?
No, what we would, if this became a site for the reclamation districts to grab the RTM, they'd probably use Highway 12, and this barge landing would be eliminated, unless there was some reason why the community thought this was a good place for a permanent facility for, people who use this area during boating. Again, these are one of these things to think about in terms of what gets left behind on all these sites. Ideas that you have would be fantastic.
Yep.
Okay, you want to move on to the next slide, Catherine?
Would love to. The last meeting, there were lots of comments on bridges being raised in the Delta, and just like you all, I've been sitting behind a bridge and waiting 45 minutes for it to go up and down before driving off. So this map here shows for the central alignment, the Bolden Island barge is shown on there. And then for the eastern alignment, we have a barge landing down at the lower Roberts Tract. And maybe you remember that all from our last meeting there in March. So the three areas where we could conceivably be purchasing the concrete liners from are the East Bay area, the Port of Stockton, and potentially from Port of West Sacramento. All of those areas have existing concrete batch plants that could facilitate the kind of volume that we would need. And you can see that you can get to both of those landings to deliver the liner material from both the East Bay area and from Port of Stockton. But if the contract was awarded to a firm up along the Port of West Sacramento, you have the Rio Vista Bridge and then the 3 Mile Slough Bridge that would open up on that route to get to Bolden. And there is an option, it's not shown on here, where if it came from West Sac, there's no avoiding the Rio Vista Bridge, but you could go around Sherman Island before you got into the barge landings on the two islands. So I just wanted to present this to you in terms of bridge impacts from the liner fabrication location.
Okay. Questions specifically on this slide? I have Anna and Cece. Do you have questions specifically on this slide?
Yes.
Anna. Oh, Cece, go ahead, and then we'll do Anna.
How exactly are you going to go around Sherman Island?
Yeah.
I've done it in a fishing boat. I've never tried it on a barge.
Oh,
Maybe
okay.
somebody who's an expert here can help me.
Very carefully.
That's what I would imagine.
All right, so that sounds like it's a work in progress. Anna.
How many reclamation districts have signed up for the, you call it RTM, I call it tunnel muck, whatever. How many reclamation districts have signed up to take those materials?
We're not at the point in the process where we've solicited that feedback. Our engineers who work with a lot of reclamation districts say that this material would be perfectly usable for the types of borrow material that a lot of these reclamation districts use.
We have Gil on right here. He's an expert. Gil.
Well, nobody's signed up yet. We don't even know where the material is going to be yet. One of the problems we've had over the years, both ports do dredging and they stockpile material. We just can't get, for a reasonable price, can't get the material to where we need it. So that's the key, is how much is it going to cost, even if it is usable, to get it to where we need it. And we're talking, 20, 30 years from now, we may be done working on levees because of all the work we have to do between now and then for other things. So we don't really know what the demand's going to be. And certainly the distance we have to travel to move it is going to be a problem.
Yep. Okay, thank
Maybe
you.
you guys could offer it to the reclamation districts for free.
That was the intention. It's just the issue isn't the cost of the borough material. The issue is the transportation to where it needs to go. It's our understanding that the stockpile that Port of Stockton has, reclamation districts come out there and they dig through it and sort it and grab it from there and transport it by truck to where it needs to go.
All right. We have a Jim Cox and we have Mike Moran. Jim Cox.
I'm just going to make a comment about going around Sherman Island. That you'd be crossing Sherman Lake to do that, which is very shallow. Even in my whaler, I go across there at high tide. You would definitely have to do some dredging if you're going to have barges going through there on a regular basis.
Wouldn't want to do that.
Okay, thank you. You know, honestly, Jim, I think we were waiting for you to chime in on that one. Mike Moran.
Pretty much the same thing as Jim said. It looks like you're going down the Sacramento 3 Mile Slough. You're going to be going right near Brainerd Island State Recreation Area, and it's pretty much a choke point for a lot of recreation traffic, non-motorized as well as motorized, and folks on the beach on 7 Mile Slough. So I don't know how big these barges are and what kind of towboat you'll be using. And then going down the Sac beyond Sherman Lake State Wildlife Area, it seems like the next feasible area be Broad Slough. Does anybody else have any ideas about that?
All right.
I think, Peter here, I think the big problem that we have is we don't have the spec on the size of these barges. You know, we have width issues, length issues, spin issues.
We'll include that in next month's presentation when we go through the final transportation plans. That's a good comment.
Great. And we have Cece, Karen, and Jim Cox. Do you have questions specifically or comments on this slide?
Yes, the independent technical review panel stated that the RTM was not reusable. And my other issue is that you need to compare the barge draft to the channel depth if you're going to go around.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of confusion about the RTM.
I can speak to it.
Okay.
The ITR didn't have the document from the previous report that had all of the analysis of whether or not it was usable. They were commenting based on their experience in other projects on the use of the RTM from those projects. It wasn't really in their scope to comment on that. They were really just expressing their experience from other projects. So there will be additional work done to demonstrate that it can be used. Our engineers are 100% confident that we're going to be able to use it. But nothing's 100%, 99.9% confident that this material is appropriate with proper drying to be used for the embankments down at the forebay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Awesome. And again, that's been an issue that's come up a few different times. We'll make sure that that information is definitely in the Q&A matrix because we really, you know, we've spent some significant time on RTM. So we want to make sure that everyone's clear about that dynamic. Jim.
Well, I was just going to comment to what Mike had said about barges going through Broad Slough. There are barges that go through there at now. I'm not sure what their drafts are. There's not actually a channel in there, but it is, it is possible to go through there. But boy, that sure adds a lot of distance onto the route.
All right, and Mike, do you have another comment, Mike?
Yeah, real quick, just to keep in mind the drought barrier that has gone in at False River and how that changes the flows and tidal action coming down 3 Mile Slough pretty dramatically. Don't know when it's going to be in, if it's going to go in. Just something to keep in consideration.
Awesome.
Thanks.
All right.
All right.
Next slide.
Okay. There was a lot of conversation at the last meeting about where we had cited the shaft on Staten Island. this is a maintenance shaft, so it's one of the smaller sites. It's not like Glanville. There's no RTM produced here. This is a place where the contractor can go down and do routine maintenance on the TBM machine. Consider it like a car tune-up so that it can make the last 5 miles to Bolden Island. And where we had located it was on a narrower dimension of the island. And Sean pointed out that it would be much better to locate it in a wider area of the island. I'm no bird expert, Sean is, and maybe he can speak to the species, but working with some folks that understand these issues, there was a request to move it. We moved it further north, right along the road, to keep the impact close to the road and in a much wider section of the island. Sean, I don't know if you want to speak to this at all.
Is that the location that I sent you?
It is.
So the benefit of this location is not only is it in a wider part of the island, but it's right next to a developed area. There's a house there. That house has some power lines. So it would be the least evil place to put it on the island in terms of impact on cranes.
Thanks, Sean.
All right.
I think least evil is a good way to describe that there.
All right. And Sean, you have your hand up. Was that, were you good?
Yeah, that was it.
All right.
Okay, great. And again, this shaft is only on the central alignment. It's not on the eastern alignment. And then the last slide before we get into the southern facilities, there's been a lot of conversation around the impact to recreational facilities. I don't have much to add to it, but what I wanted to do was take the recreational map that we gave you and overlay the alignment, both the central and the east. You can see it on this map. And the circles are used to highlight the names of all the different facilities that are included in the alignment. And by overlaying this with the transportation, you can start to formulate in your own mind some of the impact that the construction or the traffic to get to these sites might have on either access or noise or aesthetics to some of the recreational areas in the Delta. And again, I don't have anything to speak to it, but I wanted to make this map available to you. If anyone wants a full-size print or an 11 by 17 print, we're glad to run into the office and make copies and mail them to your house. All you have to do is send in to Jasmine a request for it. And if there's any maps in general that you'd like to see the overlay of the facilities on, we'd be glad to produce those for you.
You know, this one might be a real nice one to add to our big book of maps to, you know, kind of pull this stuff together.
Yeah, we do have the rec map as one of the GIS maps that we provided very early on, and then we supplemented it as we added some additional recreational facilities. But what we hadn't done is layer the actual sites on top of any of these GIS maps. So I thought I would tee off that conversation here and start with this recreational one, because it is the one that's brought up quite frequently in these meetings.
All right. Before we go on to the next.
Karen, I saw Karen Mann had a raised hand there.
You sure does. Oh, and now Mike. Karen. You're on mute. Karen, we still can't hear you.
Try me now.
There you go.
Oh, it shows. Okay, sorry about that. I still don't see some of the areas that I pointed out to you in the past regarding recreation. Which would be affected by the central route. Is there another map that I should be looking at, perhaps?
I don't know if Karen Asklin is on the phone, but I think that you got the feedback and updated this map. Is that right?
Karen is
Yes, this is the recreational facilities map.
Yes.
This.
I'm not seeing the Mildred Island Anchorage area noted, and
Right.
I'm not seeing the local elementary school, which is within a stone's throw. And and Catherine knows that I'm very, very concerned, and I can't blow up these maps enough. So yes, whatever I can get is for maps, I'd really appreciate.
Yeah, we don't have the school on here. These were recreational facilities.
Well, the school's kind of important. I don't know if my grandkids would say that's recreation, but but it is for me to get them out of the house, but that's beside the point.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I see the recreation areas, but you need to be aware that the entire, the only way in and out of Discovery Bay is through that river that this goes right under. And so that's an issue.
Okay, I know that next meeting's maps will be blown up for each one of these sites, so hopefully it'll be a lot easier for you to see some of those. If there's any recreational comments you have on this, again, just send them into Jasmine. Feel free to copy Karen Askin, and she'll make sure, she'll double check that she got them. I think she said that she had picked up your comments from the last time and incorporated them in here, so I apologize if we're missing some things still. And then what we can do in terms of what I think the map with the schools on it is cultural facilities. Is that right? I can't remember, Karen.
No, that would be, it was kind of described as a sensitive receptors one originally.
Okay.
We were the schools, medical facilities, hospitals, fire. Safety.
Okay, so we can do another blow up map for that one and lay this on that as well. Well, we can do that and send that out to you.
And since I have you, Catherine, as you know, I emailed you about the water treatment plant and the sewage plant that handles all of Discovery Bay and all of Byron. And that maintenance shaft looks scarily close. I mean, really scary close.
Yep.
So that's the only drinking water that we have for about 15 to 18,000 people, maybe 20. Just FYI. That's kind of
okay. Appreciate that. Thank you. All right. That's it for me.
Well, and again, there were several comments, and the timing was terrific previously, where people were saying, "What are you doing with our comments? How is it manifesting itself in the actual design?" I hope that this begins to answer that question. I actually think we need to, start putting some things in writing a little bit differently. I like the idea of perhaps a matrix that we had heard earlier from Barbara, but hopefully this begins to answer that question. And so moving on to item 4C, Catherine, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll just tee this off. So we've done deep dives into each of the sites. We put things a little bit out of a sequence for the March meeting to address some feedback we had from you that you wanted to see the bigger picture. So we did a presentation on each of the, we did it on the overall site layouts for the entire alignments. And we had skipped over doing the deep dive in the Southern Complex. So we wanted to do that for you. So this will represent the last of the deep dives on the facility locations. And just as a reminder, in next May's meeting, as we discussed, we'll go into the final proposed maps for each of those individual facilities. So you'll have another chance to take a look at that. But with that, I'm going to hand this over to Phil, who's going to take control of the screen and walk you through the Southern Complex. Phil, are you ready?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully everyone can hear me. We will take a tour here. Hopefully my screen has refreshed, and let's see if we can go to the first slide. So has everybody got that one? I want to make sure I'm
looking good.
Okay, so we've spent a lot of time over the last few months starting up at the intakes, showing where the water would come out of the Sacramento River, and then showing you a lot about the tunnels and the siting of the shafts and how a lot of that facilities would work. And we've even shown you a basic summary of the whole thing. We've never really given you a deep dive into the southern end here, where the two corridors would come together. The water that had been diverted would be lifted out of the tunnel system and delivered into the State Water Project facilities. So this presentation is all about those facilities. We call it the Southern Complex. It's been called a few other things throughout the last few months as we've been talking. South Delta Facilities, which is the title on this particular slide. But here's a basic schematic where the flow comes in from the tunnel from coming off the upper right part of the page there, goes through the final shaft. That's the shaft that would have been used to drive the tunnel to the north, and then flows into the pump station, where the pump station lifts it into the forebay. The forebay then would have an outlet structure that's also uses the tunnel shafts to take the water underneath the Byron Highway up the other side through the retrieval shafts. Then there's a flow control structure that basically manages the flows that come out of the forebay through the tunnels and then into the canal. And since we're going to be co-delivering into this canal from Clifton Court forebay, a flow control structure is also needed in the existing canal just upstream on the Clifton Court forebay side of where we would connect in. So a couple of details, you know, it's a 36-foot diameter tunnel coming in, as we've discussed before. The pump station capacity is the 6,000 CFS for the proposed project. Southern forebay sizing would store up to 9,000 CFS. So that's size, it's a 12-hour buffer capacity, which is 12 hours of the normal peak pumping capacity of the bank's facilities. You see on the bottom, the bank's facility is actually capable of pumping almost 11,000 CFS, but they don't do that on a regular basis. It's more typical maximum flow is around 9,000. So that 9,000 CFS, if you do the math, turns into approximately 9,000 acre feet. That would be the operating volume. And that at about 12.5 feet of operating level, it turns into a 750 acre water surface forebay. And then coming out of the forebay, there's two roughly 40-foot diameter tunnels. The reason these are larger, and there's two of them, because if you can see, it has to deliver 11,000 CFS because that's the bank's flow capacity. These are pretty short tunnels, and I'll show you in a minute. So let's go through how we sited the forebay to start with. We basically looked at everywhere we could to site a facility in the vicinity of the delivery points, which is the California Aqueduct there you see in the sort of lower right part of the photo. We even looked at opportunities to split the reservoir into a couple of pieces to make sure we checked out all the basic land areas in the area. So as you can see in the slide, sites 1, 3, 4, 6, and 7 were eliminated. They were either too small for what we needed to do. They had other environmental side effects. Poor access was really a big problem with a lot of them, and poor compatibility, like if you see Alt 4 in the back of Clifton Court forebay, it's really difficult to get anything from there over to the California Aqueduct. So what that resulted in is two alternatives. And so we compared these alternatives in additional detail. And as you can see from the comparison there, the alternative 2 came out better for the, operational compatibility. It's very close to the canal, as you can see. The existing land use, the existing infrastructure in the area, the geotechnical conditions. And I think one of the big drivers is the logistics. The ability, because this forebay would also be where the tunnel drive would have to be, and the ability to get over onto, I think it's Union Island there where Alt 5 requires massive bridges and a whole very difficult complex for getting any kind of rail service and truck traffic onto that site. So logistics was a big dagger in its heart, and Alt 2 was selected. So I'm going to go into a little bit deeper dive on the various parts of it. We've divided it up into 3 pieces here. The northern part is the basically the pumping plant area, which is site A there. B is mainly the forebay area, and then C is the area across the Byron Highway where the flow control structures are. You can see that A and B together are pretty large sites. They're almost 2,000 acres of constructed area. And, with the 750 acre forebay, that's just the water surface, not considering the size of embankments and some of the other permanent facilities like what I'll show you in a minute. The final site is about 1,275 acres. Then as you get down to the tunnels head underneath, the tunnels are about 8,000 feet long each. as they end down there in area C, you can see that that area, the construction site's about 180 acres, and the final project site's about 120. So starting up in area A, you can see the pumping plant. The two different tunnel alignments are shown in blue as they come in from the right there. And this is sort of a schematic view. You don't really see the tunnel shaft, which I'll show you in a minute. So we're going to take some of the topsoil and stockpile it up there on the top end. And then some of the RTM that ends up left over. The RTM balance is such that we're trying to build the forebay. So we may end up a little bit of excess RTM in this area that we'll stockpile in that area. And then the typical things you would see for supporting work like this is the segment storage for tunneling, concrete batch plants, contractors laydown area for the pumping plant, and the tunnel contractors laydown area. And there'd be offices and that kind of thing in this area. And the two big red lines there are rail access to help minimize the truck traffic in the area. So the segments would be brought in by rail, and so would the aggregate for the batch plant. And the rails have to have these long straight lengths so that you can progressively unload the cars as they get dropped and left there while you unload them, and then you bring them back out, and the railroad takes them off and either refills them or takes away what's on them. So then moving down, well, now I thought we were going to move down, but I guess no, we're going to go through the pump station. So here's the site of the pump station. This is a graphical rendering of what it might look like. You can see the pump station building itself there, and some of the support features. There's an electrical building appended onto the back, and actually what the arrow is pointing to, those blue things with white on them, are big air conditioning units for the electrical gear. And then in the back there'll be the electrical substation to feed the electric motors that run the pumps. And then there's a couple of the office building, and then equipment storage and shops. And then the big light gray thing where the inlet structure is called out there with the crane over it, that's the tunnel shaft that we use to transfer the water into the pump station, and also to be able to overflow out into the forebay area. Give you a little bit more detail on that. So here's the same rendering from an angle with some cuts put through it. So that's, you can see the crane there kind of in the upper right. It's tan there, it got cut in half because that's where the slice goes. So that's the tunnel shaft on the very right there. And water would flow out of the tunnel shaft through that rectangular opening over, and you can kind of see past it. You can see the arrows going across the floor of the rectangular opening. And then they enter the wet well of the pump station down there. And then, so the water would flood into the bottom of that wet well, and then you can see the pump columns with the pump bells, the inlet bells down at the bottom. They hang inside a cylindrical well, so it's similar to a well you'd see on a agriculture, but these are pretty big, obviously, because these are big pumps. So the water would flow down that well and then up through the bell. And then over on the left here, you could see where it would come up through the pump and out behind this. We have a level control weir well to control it's a kind of a techno geeky thing about how to control the discharge head on the pumps that you got to have to make the pumps function properly. And then that would mostly be submerged, and then that would flow into the southern forebay there where you see the arrows. And if you, just a couple of interesting things, if you look inside the pump station, you can see the motors, the sort of brownish things behind the columns there. And in the back, far back side, up towards the roof, you can see the bridge crane that goes across there. So the concept here is that vehicles could drive through the garage door. That's a tractor trailer rig will fit in there because this stuff's pretty large. And the crane could pick up the motor or the some of the pump components and set them on a tractor trailer rig right in there for movement off for whatever reason, maintenance or repair or whatever you're going to, or even installation of the pumps. You can also see the substation in the back and the electrical building behind the room and a little enclosure around the air conditioning units. And then this gantry crane over the tunnel shaft is there. In order to be able to isolate the pump station from the tunnel system for maintenance and safety of workers and all that, there'd be large gates that would be slid down into those slots you can see just to the left of the crane on the surface there. And also this crane could be used to lower a temporary pump if we ever had to dewater the tunnel. A large pump would be lowered down in using that crane and then pump the tunnel out into the forebay. So that was area A. So now we are moving on to area B. Again, the southern forebay area. One thing I forgot to point out, the areas in green are the permanent facility boundaries, and the area in yellow are the construction boundaries. And this drawing is a little bit complicated. There's a couple areas circled in yellow. Those are areas that we're not going to touch at all. So they're circled in yellow. So they're inside the yellow. So they're circles inside the outer yellow are areas. And that's primarily because they're underneath a large power corridor there. So here's a more detailed layout of the work site for the forebay itself. You can see the embankment's kind of been shown just with the black line for simplicity. So the concept here is that we'll have RTM coming out of the tunnel, and that's the area in the north for RTM treatment for drying and processing. And then there's a stockpile in the middle, and that's also going to be RTM we bring from the Twin Cities Glanville shaft, swing it around on the railroad, and you can see another railroad segment that comes in here to deliver that RTM into the floor of the reservoir for use to construct the embankments. And then you can also see there's a RTM treatment area for the southern tunnels at the bottom there. I'm going to go through a little bit later a quick construction sequence, but one of the things, there's a lot of peat in the upper soil horizons in this area that needs to be removed under the embankment areas, and it would be removed, stockpiled in the peat storage area, covered so that it doesn't do greenhouse gas off-gassing. You can also see the segment storage for the southern tunnels. There's a little work area just to the south of the where the outlet is on the reservoir on the bottom end for the contractor down there. And then there's a contractor area to the west of the main reservoir. That's for the reservoir contractor. And we're showing a first responder site and a heliport site here. We know we need to have enhanced first responders in this area to support tunnel drives. They have to be very close. I think we've discussed concepts with you about some of this could be enhanced use of the existing first responder facilities in the area that could be shared with the community. So the next slide is the slide of the embankment of the forebay, and Graham Bradner, who you guys have met, is going to just quickly, I'm going to run the slides, but he's going to talk about these.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Yeah, this is just a couple of slides that we're going to go through here. So this slide is going to show how the top of the embankment was established and how the spillway level was established. So we'll work up first on the internal slope of the reservoir, and then there is another click, and we'll look at things on the external side. So beginning on the internal side, we've got typical foundation, natural ground elevations out there between about -8 and +2 feet elevation. As Phil already described, we've got a maximum normal operating water surface of elevation 17.5. And so that's, again, referencing back to what Phil was talking about, that's the top of that normal operating band. Above that water surface, we have 3.5 feet for wind and wave run up. So this is a pretty broad, flat, broad reservoir. We could get some wind that could push waves and develop waves. And so we want to make sure we've got enough height of embankment above the water surface to make sure that waves don't splash up and over and out of the spillway. That also provides the what's called freeboard, which is essentially the same purpose, to provide that extra embankment height above the normal water surface elevation. So we then have the spillway invert. So this is the height at which water would be able to flow over the spillway. And if you can recall from the previous slide Phil showed, the spillway ties directly into Italian Slough, just north of Clifton Court and very close to the confluence with Old River. The spillway would only be for emergency situations where there's some sort of inflow into the reservoir and there's, the water levels are climbing and we got to have a way for the water to be able to flow out into the natural water body of Italian Slough. So that's set at elevation 21 feet. And then we've used a water surface, a maximum spill height of 2.5 feet above the spillway invert. So that's the height at which the maximum height at which the water will be spilling over the spillway. That's how we set the width of the spillway was by establishing that height. And then under that type of condition, if you were to have a spilling event with very high levels in the reservoir, again, we have to bring back in the wind and wave runoff to make sure we've got enough embankment height to contain, all the water that could splash against the side of the embankment. And then finally, at the very tippy top there, we've got what's called residual freeboard, and that's a California Division of Safety of Dams requirement to have a minimum 1.5 feet of residual freeboard above the maximum water surface elevation. So all of that adds up to a top elevation of 28 feet. And if you, we have some other information on the water side, Phil, if you'll click the slide forward one.
And we do have a question when you have a moment, Graham.
Okay, sure. So here we've got, for comparison, a 200-year flood elevation that includes sea level rise and climate change for year 2100. So that's a water surface of elevation 20.8 provided by DWR. And then we add to that a freeboard height, and this is really coming from the Title 23 of the California Code of Regulations, which dictates freeboard requirements for big bypasses and flood control systems within the state. So those are required to be 4 to 6 feet. We can see that even with maximum 6 feet of freeboard, we're still exceeding that elevation at 26 feet. So that's just for comparison, what that buildup looks like at the inside and outside.
Okay, we do have some background noise if someone's typing or thumping or something. I'm just putting that out there. Go ahead, Graham.
Well, that's it from this slide, but are we taking questions now, or do we want to cover?
I think we wanted to take a couple as we moved along. I have Karen, David, Barbara. Karen. Karen, we can't hear you.
One more time.
There you go, girl. There you go.
Good at it.
I'm sorry. Anyway, thank you for such a thorough slide and explanation. A major concern regarding emergency medical assistance. I don't know if you're aware, but Eastern Contra Costa County was reduced from 9 fire stations down to 1. We have only one that covers, and it's located on Bixler Road. We no longer have a fire station on Bethel Island. We no longer have a fire station in Byron, which is where you're pretty much at. So as it is, we're having a heck of a time with only one engine unit to support all of the homes that have been built out in Discovery Bay and Byron area. So I wanted to make sure that you knew that.
Yeah, we were aware of I wasn't personally aware of the specifics, Karen, but we were aware of the limitations, and that's one of the things we were hoping to help, supplement the community with the facilities we would use.
You wouldn't have to supplement, you'd have to put in a whole new station.
Right.
And the people to work it, because if something happens in the tunnel and it's an emergency or down in this area, they're going to want to focus on that. I get that. But then we've got probably about 20,000 homes and businesses that are unprotected. So that's a real problem. Our
Right.
nearest station other than that is Brentwood, which is about 8 or 9 miles away. And that's just not acceptable. So that's number one. Number two, I have a question of if the water goes over the freeboard and goes into the river, it goes into Italian Slough. I assume that the water level will increase and it will be dispersed both to the north and to the south. Is that how that works?
Yes, it would be absorbed into the broader river system. And there is still, a good bit of hydraulic modeling that needs to be done to evaluate the impacts of that. But yeah, it's connecting up to the much broader waterway.
So would this occasion, do you think, hypothetically, happen more towards the winter time, springtime, summer, just so that I have an idea? The reason I ask is that myself and many of us, probably about 3,500, maybe 4,000 homes, are actually waterfront sites. And when the dams were all released in about 10 years ago, we all had incredible flooding in our homes. And so I just want to know if this is something that we have to be aware of for our own personal homes and businesses.
Right. So the difference with this reservoir, I mean, it is a California state regulated facility. It's not an in-stream reservoir with any sort of natural watershed. We looked at a couple of different conditions to try and identify what would be the critical condition for sizing the spillway. Most reservoirs in a natural watershed, you've got water flowing in through the rivers, you've got precipitation that can fall much more broadly over a big watershed and flow down into that reservoir, and you have to size it for that type of big precipitation or snowmelt event. In this case, this is a really contained system. And so it would really take some event of, we talked about a couple of different scenarios of power outages, malfunctioning gate, having the pumping plant running at full capacity and no ability to discharge out of the forebay. All of those would be different events that we looked at that would have a very, very unlikely chance of occurring, but need to be considered when sizing the spillway. So to answer your question, Karen, it's really going to be a very unlikely event. It would be hard to put a specific return period type thing on it because it's not even associated with a naturally occurring event that has any sort of statistical recurrence. So it's just going to be a very rare event. And I think we could follow up more with additional details on that, but that's how that summarizes now. Does that answer your question?
May I say something? We
Sure.
are currently trying to live through a very unlikely event.
Sure. Well, that's true. Yep.
Okay, so the odds of this flooding our properties is becoming more likely because I don't believe unlikely events anymore. I don't believe that they can happen. So,
I think one other perspective to put on this, the maximum flow that could ever spill out of this is 6,000 CFS, which is compared to the flows in the old river and some of those things it's maybe a 20th of some of the maximum flows in there. So the flows that are discharged are pretty small compared to the rest of it. Also, as Graham said, we will have many levels of safeguards to prevent this from ever happening. The whole concept here is, it's like you say, some unlikely event. I completely understand your perspective on that. What we don't want to do is in that unlikely event, have the reservoir fill up and spill over the embankment, which would erode the embankment and potentially cause it to fail. So this is a place in this highly unlikely event to allow it to spill without destroying the facility. And I think, like I said, if that embankment were to go out, that would be way more of a big deal for you to worry about than a spill over the spillway.
Okay, we do have other folks who have questions. David, Barbara, Cece, to start. David.
Yes, I'm really glad to see that you've been dealing with, Italian Slough there, and that this is actually going to be flowing in there. I mean, I mentioned in the last meeting that I actually see this, I'd like to promote this as a dual benefit facility. And I've mentioned this to Carrie. I really think that, you know, with the issues going on with algae and, you know, health issues with the water down there in the South Delta, you know, I think there's a benefit to be able to take some of this water and be able to flush it back into the Delta during times when there's problems and issues. And, you know, have you thought about other plumbing? I'm sure there's a better way to do it than out over a spillway. I mean, would there just be a flow control device needed, you know, on one of the 4 bays into Italian Slough? And Carrie, are you planning to look at this as part of the CEQA process?
So I know that everyone loves when I give this answer, but we're just not quite there yet. So what we've been talking about, when we were talking about it, we were considering it as a mitigation measure, but we haven't got to the point yet where we know what kind of mitigation measures we need. So I need to get a little bit further down the road. I think we could certainly sort of brainstorm with Graham ways that we could look at it, but in terms of whether we would incorporate it as mitigation, we're a little bit away from that still.
There was a lawyer that spoke to me a week ago or so, and I haven't done a lot of the research, but he indicated to me that the water in those 4 bays is actually considered part of the Delta. And he said that the water in the 4 bays, until it's pumped into the aqueduct, is part of the Delta. And some law in 1986 or something said that, you know, only water can be pumped out if it's, you know, of a nature that won't affect the Delta. So that if the water quality in the Delta is really bad and there's health issues, and you're literally over the levee to all of this nice clear water that's actually part of the Delta, it would seem to be that it would be natural that you'd try to, you know, take care of the Delta before exporting.
All right. Barbara.
I'm going to send you a list of 17 questions I have about this presentation, and I'm just going to real quickly, I'm not going to go through 17 of them.
That's a great way to handle that, though. Thank you, Barbara. Appreciate that.
But I do want to make sure that it's covered for the next meeting. But I want to focus on just 2 quick things. In Water Fix, we knew that there was a tremendous amount of diesel emission for construction of this part of the project. You're looking at a concrete batch down there. I know we've had conversations with Catherine about moving everything to electric, but I really want to get a handle on how much of that, is there really a commitment by the exporters to fund, and are we really going to get to 100%? Because those emissions really would require, for health and safety reasons, the complete relocation of the town of Byron, and really dangerous levels of diesel emissions for the kids that go to those schools that are close by. The only other second thing that I have a question for is, I'm not so worried about the operation of managing water and flow, creating a flood condition. You all are smart. I'm sure this is getting worked out. What I am concerned about is you're building, Phil, am I right, to a 200-year standard?
200-year plus 2100 sea level rise and the 2100 climate change hydrology, if you know what I mean.
So is that from the 4th climate change analysis?
I'm not an expert at climate change. I wonder, Carrie, do you know?
So it's from the Central Valley Flood Protection Board's flood situation coming off of the San Joaquin, the Sacramento, and Yolo, in combination with the 10.2 feet of sea level rise of the Golden Gate.
Okay, I would strongly urge that we do a comparison to your own report that came from the 4th climate change analysis, because what I'm concerned about is not just the combination of sea level rise hurting facility coming up the San Joaquin, but storm events coming down the San Joaquin. It seems to me the two together are just a perfect disaster, perfect storm for a catastrophe.
Right, and that's the information that we have that's coming out of the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan, but I hear you, and I'll do that comparison to see if there's a difference.
Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. And again, please do get your comments in, because we want to make sure that we're including that in the discussion. Cece, Anna, and then Mike. Cece.
Okay. what are the composition? What is the composition of the embankments, the 4-bay embankments? Specifically, I'm concerned about liquefaction susceptibility in the event of an earthquake.
I'm wondering if you'd be willing to wait one slide for that.
Okay.
Because we should have let Graham finish.
Sorry, Graham.
That's all right. No, that's good. If you're willing to wait, Cece, we'll talk about it on the next slide.
Okay, and I have one other issue, which is the effect of traffic impact on Byron Elementary School.
Yeah, and I think we're going to address that a little bit more in detail next meeting in May.
Great.
We do have a chart in here on the expected truck traffic coming to the site. We just haven't modeled where it's all coming from and whatnot, but we'll be ready for that in the next meeting.
There you go. All right, Anna, Mike. Anna.
Okay, I have 3 questions. One, do we know what the noise would be, the ongoing noise would be from operations of this pump station on the surrounding communities? Do we know, oh, I know that there are houses around here because our dear friend Suzanne Womack is one of the people who will suffer the most from this southern portion. So I'd like to see a map that really details out what the houses look like and where they are in relation to this. And then the thing that struck me was, why would you ever need to dewater the tunnel? What would be the scenario that would make that relevant?
Inspection.
Yeah, I think that, Anna, the tunnel's expected to last, and we're going to make all of this investment in time and energy and disruption to people. They don't want to have to do this again for a lifetime or more than a lifetime. So we have to inspect it over time, make sure everything's okay, and at some point in time, it'd be better if it ever did reach its useful life to potentially, if there were ever an opportunity to rehabilitate parts of it.
Great. All right, Mike. Mike, you're muted. Mike.
Sorry about that. I'm going to wait till the end of the presentation. We can go ahead and move along.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Thanks.
All right. There you go.
Okay, great. Phil, if you click to the next slide, please. So this is a typical cross-section of the embankment. It is an earth-fill embankment. So this was, I think it's been previously discussed, the intention would be to use RTM for construction of this embankment, so long as it meets the specifications for embankment material. So it would be constructed with 4-to-1 side slopes on the interior and exterior, and again, top elevation set at elevation 28. And then by comparison, you can see on the scale to the right where the max, approximately where the max water surface elevation would sit at 17.5. A couple other key features here on the interior slope would be lined with riprap to protect against wave damage and erosion of the slope. We've got a fine grain cutoff wall through the center of the embankment and down into the foundation. This is a seepage cutoff wall, a soil mixed with clay, which is a soil bentonite cutoff wall, and then a fine grain cap above that to complete the cutoff through the embankment. This would extend down to a depth that really keys into a fine grain layer at this point until we get a lot more site-specific geotechnical information. We don't know exactly what depths that wall is going to need to extend down to, but the intention would be for it to key into an underlying deeper fine grain layer and complete that cutoff. That cutoff wall surrounds the full perimeter of the reservoir, so it's a full ring of cutoff wall. We've also got down into the foundation. You see what's flagged at the bottom as shear walls, and those are dotted lines. Those are actually an in situ mixture of, these are created with large augers, and they drill down into the subsurface, and you introduce cement into the subsurface and mix that material in And the reason they're called shear walls is they're oriented as panels like this. In this case, they'll be every 15 to 20 feet along the alignment of the embankment. And the purpose of those shear walls is to add strength to the foundation and address concerns like liquefaction and instability of the foundation, because we, as Phil mentioned, we do expect to have peat materials within the foundation, also potentially soft, very soft clays or liquefiable sands in the foundation. So between the seepage cutoff wall addressing seepage underneath the embankment and the shear walls addressing foundation instability, those are some of the large foundation elements that are included in the reservoir. And then just to point out a couple of other just features before I let Phil have the mic back. We do have a tow drain on the outboard toe of the embankment. That's to capture any remaining under seepage that may be going around or a little bit through or whatever beneath the embankment. That's a capture system for that minor water. And then adding gravel access roads on the crest and toe for all weather access and patrolling of the reservoir. That's all I have, Phil.
Okay. So moving ahead now to Area C, which is the other side of the Byron Highway on the downstream side of the dual tunnels. So in this area, you can see the major feature here is this South Delta outlet and control structure, the big white thing on the side of the canal. You can also see the California Aqueduct control structure that would be in the canal. Clifton Court Forebay is up on the upper right-hand corner of the sheet, and right underneath the word laydown, that's where the Skinner Fish Facility is. So that's the fish screen for flow out of the Clifton Court into the California Aqueduct, headed to the Banks Pumping Station, which is off the page down to off the bottom of the page. So in this, one of the key things is during construction, we would build what's called a cellular cofferdam on the upstream side of the California Aqueduct control structure, and then the downstream side, right about where the green line crosses on the downstream side. And that would allow us to dry up the canal to build these structures in it. And then you can see this temporary bypass. That's a parallel sheet pile wall where the flow would be diverted around our work area inside this essentially a rectangular channel for delivery to the Banks pump station while we're working. And then there's obviously the contractor's laydown areas. Access would be up North Bruns Road there. There's a minor amount of access from the other side on Bruns Road, which is along the edge on the right side there. What is, if you haven't been out here, what you probably don't really notice from, and you can kind of see it in these pictures, when they built the California Aqueduct and they excavated the soil, they piled it on the two sides of the canal. So there's some pretty big dirt piles there. And so like the green line around the structure is, a lot of that is a cut slope to remove some of that material back kind of down towards the original ground. And the same thing has to happen on the right side in order for us to be able to put that bypass channel around it. So this is a rendering kind of showing you what it would really look like. The cut slope isn't quite as visible here, but you can see how the structure lays in there, would be feeding into the canal, and then the control structure in the canal ahead of it. You can see the forebay in the background that we talked about, the outlet structure, and the pump stations clear in the distance behind that. And then obviously Clifton Court Forebay, and as Graham mentioned, there's Italian Slough. We don't show the spillway in this particular rendering, but it would have been up there by the where the diagonal right side of the forebay turns to straight. Right in that area is where the spillway would feed. So it is pretty close to where the Old River confluence is. So you might ask, well, I live in Discovery Bay. What am I going to see from this thing? So basically, you're going to see the pump station at a, not a huge projection. This is a rendering of what this would, how this would fit with the topography in the area. So you can basically see the pump station a little bit on the horizon, but the rest of the facility pretty well blend in. You don't really notice them. And even the pump station's not super high. There's a blow up there of what it might look like from it's several miles away. So it helps diminish the visual impact on it to some extent. So we, like Catherine mentioned, we do have a summary of the truck trips we expect. So in the early part of the work, we're basically building the roads and rail and all the access facilities to get there. So there's a lesser amount of truck trips supporting that. But then once we get in and start doing the earthwork and ground improvement for the reservoir and the pump station pads and start building the tunneling, then we're going to have more truck trips per day, plus there will be about 4 trains per day during during the main tunneling period. And so those tunnels would be hauling in tunnel segments, and one a day would be bringing RTM from up north, and about one a day to haul cement and aggregates. Now that's the peak load during that period of time. It's really going to average about 2 trains a day, because we're not going to have all of that stuff coming, you know, particularly like the cement and aggregates will be busy when we're building, you know, diaphragm walls for tunnel shafts and the pump station and that kind of thing. The tunnel segments will have more trips when we're trying to keep the storage area on site full, and, you know, they'll average out, and then the RTM will probably be pretty steady through that. And then as the north tunnel picks up, you can see the truck trips pick up quite a bit for a few years there while we're constructing the kind of all the construction's going on at once at that period of time. So all of this is set on top of this construction schedule. So you can see that this is really this is kind of the biggest active area for the whole project. You know, there's the early works for the roads and rail, the north tunnels, the pumping plant, the forebay, the moving RTM in and managing it for the reservoir, the south tunnels, and then South Delta conveyance. So I'm not going to go through this schedule in detail, but it just, we've sort of sketched this all out about who's coming first and who needs to wait for who and that kind of thing, so that everybody can work together on that site. You can see it's quite a complex operation. With that, I'm going to have to make a switch here in my presentation to show you a little animation. And we're going to see how this goes here. Bear with me for a second. So you've got that view, but I got to get my controller view up as well. Okay. So what we have here is an animation that's going to show you what happens at this site through the 12 years of construction. And every time I click, you'll see the years across the top, 1 through 12. We've kind of programmed this for every quarter because everything's changed, but I really don't want to drag you through 48 clicks. So every time I click, you're going to see 4 quarters peel off on the screen in front of you. So I'll give you an example. In year 1, you can see it click through 4 quarters, and we got out there and started building the roads so that the traffic on the Byron Highway can be moved around the work site. And then as we click through year 2, those roads are getting completed and the rail sidings are in and being brought up to the site. Year 3, we start to build the on-site roads, we start to clear the areas for our work areas, and we start to use some of the material there to start doing the ground improvement at the pump station pad, because that's going to be the first place we place fill. And then as we move through year 4, we clear the reservoir area, you know, we start stockpiling the topsoil at the top, and you can see the two black dots there. We start building the shafts. The area down in the south is starting to get set up for work to begin for those tunnels as well. All the roads and rail are fully complete. Everybody's work sites are set up. Year 5, we move the peat out in the areas we need to move it. You don't see a lot of action on the other things because there's continued work for a period of time on all of these sites. You know, like ground improvements going on at the south. They're building the shafts for the tunnels, and the pump station shaft is beginning, or the pump station wet well is beginning. Then we cover the peat in the next year with some of the topsoil, and you can see the little white line coming off that tunnel in the north there is the tunnel has begun. And we're starting to generate RTM from that tunnel and starting to work on the embankments for the reservoir. You can see the shafts are in the south now. The tunnel's advancing. Continued work on the embankments with RTM. Year 8, now both tunnels are running. And again, all the RTM and embankment work is taking place. The pump station is, there's work going on at the pump station site at the same time. Year 9, we've finished the first leg of the south tunnel. The way this animation worked, the whole structure showed up, but really down on the south, but really just those shafts would be there. And then in year 10, the second tunnel is almost to the South Delta shafts. The first tunnel is actually off the page, so Year 11, the tunnels are completed. The structures are mostly complete in the south. They were working on the structure in the south while they're driving the second tunnel because it's just a reception shaft, so they just have to be able to remove the tunnel boring machine. You can see the embankments are starting to take more shape. The spillway is in place. And then the last year, we clean everything up, finish all the work, and commission the facility.
All right.
So that ends my part. I imagine there's some questions.
Yes, we do have some questions, and I'm going to be I'll note that we have only about 10 minutes left, but that said, that's what time it is. We'll do what we need to do in order to move this forward. Mike, you had a question early on. I don't know if you want to address that now or continue to hold that.
No, sure. Just real quick about the peat. How much peat is going to be moved out? How much is going to be put in storage? Why are we covering it, not using it elsewhere, or covering it temporarily and then using it elsewhere for restoration projects?
I'm going to let Graham speak to the peat. He knows more about it than I do.
Thanks.
So we have, it's there's a lot of assumptions right now, Mike, just because, again, we need to get some really good data along the potential alignment of the embankment. But we're estimating now somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1 million yards of peat that will have to be removed from the foundation and stockpiled in that area that's off to the right-hand side of the reservoir.
Mm-hmm.
The plan is to keep it on site because I'll leave this to Carrie. I don't think we know of a better beneficial reuse of that material. So the plan would be to keep it and cover it and seal it up with topsoil so that it doesn't oxidize.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. We have Jim, Cece, Barbara, Douglas, and Jim Cox. So we'll start with Jim Wallace and then Cece.
Thanks. I know that DCA has this high level of confidence that the RTM will meet spec for constructing all these embankments. What I'm a little confused about is that this tunnel material is homogenized, isn't it not, as it comes out as RTM? And the stratigraphy in the delta, we're not talking 30 or 40 foot thick sections. You've got 6, 8, 10, 12. So you're going to be running through clay, silt, sand, whatever, and then that's all homogenized as it comes out. So my question is two parts. One, do you plan to then sort the material, or do you just anticipate that a homogenized material will meet spec? Because I'm assuming this has to be an engineered fill, because it says in a fine-grained core, and fine-grained has a pretty specific geotechnical definition. So, and can you just, how are you going to manage the RTM? Because you're using a heck of a lot of it to build some really important structures.
Right. So Phil, I'll answer this one if that's all right.
Yep.
Okay. So the good points. First of all, yeah, you're right. It is homogenized as it's coming out. So the variability that might be encountered in the subsurface is not necessarily going to be reflected in the RTM as it's coming out once it's been excavated and blended and brought up to the surface and then treated. The treating process itself is going to add another layer of blending to that operation. So, and you're right, it's going to go through several cycles of sort of blending and homogenizing. In order to meet spec for embankment material, we're looking for it to have some on the order of 20 to 30% fines at least, and that's for the broad portion of the embankment. And based on all the available data that's documented in some of the past work, it really does appear that the intervals that the tunnel is going to be drilling through, excavating through, are going to generate material that's going to generally comply with that requirement. Some of the other specification requirements that we'll be looking at would be the maximum particle size. So if we do have large diameter, cobbles and things like that, we will have to exclude that material. But that is pretty, that is pretty common in borrow operations and sorting of materials. And then lastly, regarding the embankment core, at this point, we're not planning to use RTM for the fine-grained core. The majority of that was a soil bentonite cutoff wall, but then above that, there was a fine-grained core, and that would need to be a clay core. And right now, it's looking like we should be able to derive that on site here as borrow. There is a lot of reasonable clay material here that could be used for that purpose. And then as a last option, if we had to, we could import the volume of that core to make the fine-grained core, but it would be a very small percentage of the overall embankment cross-section.
So the fine-grained core is that keystone feature at the top, and that's what that. Okay,
yep.
Confused because the arrow didn't touch it. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, Cece, Barbara, Douglas, and then Jim Cox. Cece.
Back up there on the forebay, given sea level rise, the outside of the embankments will be underwater, and I don't see any riprap on them.
So yeah, that's the Byron Tract in general is protected by levees, but you're right that external water surface elevation of at year 2100 is high. It's up at 20.8. So that is something to think about. And I think I would like to take that as a comment, CC, and we'll have to think about that and contemplate if anything what should be done.
And I would also like to ask, when you're talking about truck trips, are you including those in that number that are hauling borrow fill?
We're planning to bring the RTM in by rail.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Awesome. Barbara.
So in water fix, it was estimated that the existing pumps would be used without tunnel operations 52% of the time. I know you're not going to give me an answer about that because you're going to work operations through the EIR. But what I'm curious about is with all this major work that has to go on at Clifton Court, isn't this the opportunity to go back to CalFed and fix the fish screens for when you use the existing pumps? I mean, to me, it just seems like you guys should engineer it in. We can all fight about it later, but I just think there's so much opportunity there to improve that set of conditions at the same time for fisheries.
I would leave it to Carrie, but I'm pretty sure I know what she's saying. She can correct me, but that is being considered as a separate project that DWR is evaluating.
Yeah, and that's something that's important to state water project operations in general. So it's under consideration as a separate effort.
Good. Would it be, just sorry, would it be incorporated though with construction at this time, or you're just running it as a separate?
No, at this point it's a separate project.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
All right, Douglas and then Jim Cox. Douglas, we can't hear you. You are muted. Douglas, you're still muted.
Hi.
There you go.
Hi, you hear me?
We can hear you. Yep, we're good.
Okay. All right. Okay, actually, Barbara and I are both interested in the fish screen because I read that Clifton Forebay, they have a non-performing fish screen killing all the smells. I'm more interested in why cannot they fix it, remedy it? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So, hi, this is Carrie. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
So there are a number of alternatives being studied for how to address Clifton Court Forebay fish protection, and I don't know that it's that they can't come up with an option, but I just think the study is in progress to try to determine how best to manage that.
And I'm sure that for our southern forebay, we won't have that problem.
Well, our fish screens won't be in the south, so by the time the water reaches the southern forebay, it will already be screened because it's screened at the intakes on the Sacramento River.
That's right. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Jim Cox, and then Cece wants to say something again. Jim?
Well, Barbara and Douglas pretty much covered a lot of what I wanted to say, but I really feel that this should be incorporated into this project, not be a separate project. This has been delayed and stalled for years. And fishermen have gotten to the point where we just don't believe anything that's said about this because we've heard so many promises in the past. But I just want you to keep in mind that that Clifton Court is the biggest fish killing spot in the Delta. And once fish get into Clifton Court, they don't get out. And the flows just keep them in there. The predation keeps them in there. And so it's something that really needs to be addressed. And I can't emphasize it more. And I feel when you have a project that part of the demand is an improvement in habitat, this would be the biggest habitat improvement you could do in the Delta.
Okay. Great comment. Cece, you are, okay. Can we hear you?
I just had a question. Where does the borrow come from?
The RTM is generated from the tunnel drive way up in the north at the Glanville Shaft and the Twin Cities processing center there at Twin Cities Road and the freeway. There's two tunnel drives, one north towards the intakes and one south.
I mean, clay to mix with the fines.
Yeah, the on-site.
He's gonna dig that out of the floor of the forebay.
That's right. Grading of the floor of the forebay, as well as some of we have to excavate out the upper 6 feet of the foundation underneath the embankments. And so also that material, where it's suitable, will provide that borrow.
Thank you.
All right. And as we wrap up 4D, SEC comments on agendized items, do we have any other questions or comments or discussion items on the agendized items? All right. Sarah, do you want to introduce Catherine for 4E?
Yes, Catherine, you're going to continue on with 4E in terms of your discussion on the DCA board presentation by the SEC representatives.
Yeah, so when we started this process, there was a commitment to allow a representative member of the SEC committee to do a presentation for, do a report out, should I say, to the DCA board to make that connection between this SEC process and the DCA board. For For those familiar with the DCA board, that's made up of representative board members of three of the state water contractors. There's 2 representatives from Metropolitan. You all know Sarah, she's a representative of Zone 7's board. And then Tony Estamera, the director, who is from Santa Clara Valley. So I think that we're at a point in this process where I wanted to open this up for comment to you all of having a member of the committee do a presentation report out to the SEC board. I'm proposing that it's a rotation so that it's not just one person doing it at each one of our board meetings. The format would, we would rotate it and we can go through random selection. You can nominate somebody, but the original point of that SEC member report out to the DCA board meeting was to make sure that the board members heard directly from the SEC on their thoughts on the process, if they had any recommendations to change it, and general findings around effects on the project and how those might be reduced through engineering, really trying to stick to the scope that we're in. So I wanted to throw that out as an offer to start that at our next board meeting. I also wanted to, the person who takes on this responsibility has a bit of homework. They'll prepare written comments that would need to be circulated to all of the other SEC members who would be given an opportunity to add their own comments so that it wasn't just the thoughts of just a single member, but a broad representation of the thoughts of the SEC committee. I wanted to start a dialogue on that and see what you thought about initiating that process that would then continue on a monthly basis as we do our DCA board meetings.
Okay, so how are we going to get feedback on that, Catherine or Valerie?
Just open it up to anyone who raises their hand and call on them, if you don't mind, Valerie.
Valerie, you're muted.
Talking to yourself again.
Sorry about that. So I'm looking for someone to raise their hand. Barbara and Anna. Barbara.
Mike.
And Mike. So we have Barbara, Anna, Mike.
I want to start with just, do you feel that this is an appropriate time to initiate that aspect of this engagement? It was always a part of the original contemplation, and we hadn't done it to date, so I wanted to throw that out there.
Okay, well, why don't we start with Barbara? We also have Jim Wallace who's weighing in. Barbara, go ahead.
Hi, I think it's a good idea. I think doing it with a rotation is a good idea. I think asking whoever does the reporting to get feedback from everyone else. I just think it's a good idea because then I think the SEC is operating itself. And frankly, I think it takes pressure off of you guys. You don't have to be the middle people, so to speak.
Okay, all right. Anna, thoughts?
I agree with I agree with Barbara that we should definitely rotate. There's some thoughts about the representations that are made at those meetings, so it'd be good for one of us to do it. So definitely have it circulate from, around so that we all have some input and we make sure that it's a balanced report that comes from all of us, not just from one point of view.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Mike Moran, Jim. Mike Moran, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have much new on that, though. I just agree with what Anna and Barbara said. I think it's a great idea.
Okay. Jim Wallace and David Glaske.
Yeah, look, I agree with Anna and Barbara and Mike, and I think it's time to have one of our faces in front of the DCA board.
And I think, Catherine, you said it could even be a rotating situation. I think,
Well, I mean, I think there's diversity opinions on the SEC members themselves, obviously. Turns out they're all individual humans with their own opinions. So I think rotating who speaks would ensure that there's a broad range of at least faces and voices representing the group.
Sure. And then David Glosky, you had your hand up. Are you weighing in saying, yeah, me too?
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
All
Okay.
right. I would like to propose then, and again, subject to comment, but if Jim Wallace wouldn't mind volunteering to be the first to kick it off, and that would include helping to sort of establish a process and a framework for this. As coming up with an agenda, making sure that you have buy-in from the team and how you solicit the input and how you present. I think early on we talked about a framework with a majority minority output, but again, I think the report should reflect what you want it to do. So I think the first report out might take a little bit of more work just to kind of grease the skids and establish a process. So I think if we could just have a conversation, if people think that Jim Wallace might be a good person to kick this off.
Can I just, let me say, first
Yeah.
of all, look, I'm willing to do this, and to all the board members, you know, this is it's an important responsibility, and I do it with some trepidation, because I do think, as Barbara pointed out, it needs to be even-handed, and as Anna pointed out. So I would not want to do this unless there was significant input and that everybody had a chance to chime in on what they want to hear. I'm happy to do it one time to lay down the template if that's what everybody would want me to do.
Okay. Anna has a comment.
I think we should vote over who gets to start.
Well, it'll be a rotation. We can work through everyone.
I understand, Catherine, but we should get to choose who does the first one if it's the template and the, right?
Yeah, look, if somebody else wants to do it, it's okay with me, Anna. But, you know, it's lay it out there. Somebody else want to nominate themselves to do it. I was approached to do this. I'm willing to do it. But if I'm not the right one, you decide.
Sean Worth has a comment.
I had a question. So for the first presentation, would that be for everything that we've done as part of the SEC? I mean, obviously, the ones that came after that would be about the last meeting.
Well, this would be at every board meeting, there would be another presentation. And this first one I think this first one would be good to go through in general, all of the presentations have been done to date and kind of roll that all up, but also just an opportunity to establish this as an ongoing part of the SEC's responsibility to report out to the board. So it's up to you at the end of the day to come up with the agenda. I hope that it wasn't used as a forum to necessarily, although you could protest the project, because that's not really what we're trying to do here. We're trying to talk about the process that we've established with the SEC and then provide the feedback to the board on this process and the findings of this process.
It might make sense to allow more time for the first presentation than for subsequent ones.
Sure.
And that's more territory is going to be covered.
Sure, or to reduce the scope to not necessary to use the second board meeting then to cover the content. And maybe this one just some introductory remarks on process, what's working, what might not be working, and whatnot. Completely up to you. I just thought the sooner that you all represent yourselves in front of the board and instead of nasally kind of reading off from the newsletter. I was just curious if you wanted to get started with that sooner rather than later.
How many more board meetings are there?
We have Barbara and Lindsay who have comments. Barbara Berrigan.
So this is what I would do to do the first template, and because it's a longer meeting, I would make a small steering committee out of the SEC so you don't bring Brown Act violations. Take 3 people. Take people who are more recreation focused, people who are more North Delta focused, and either fisheries or EJ or something, or maybe 4 people. Make your template that way. Let those 4 people get the original summary of comments in, and then one person can go report it. you know, but just that way you've got people getting the input in right from the start. And then after that, you'll have your template and you could just hand it off, I think, person to person. That's all.
You think forming 4 people to kind of pull it together?
Yeah,
Okay.
because I think
I'm fine with
everyone
that.
has a little specialty.
Yep.
Yeah, you know, guys, if you had like 4 or 5 people, I think that's an excellent idea, because that way, I mean, this first thing is a big job. I mean, where's it exactly, what are you doing? And so I think having the 4 or 5 folks brainstorming that and coming to some kind of an agreement would be really good.
It would be best, yeah.
All right.
This is Josh. I just want to echo Barbara's point on that. I think a steering committee does avoid the potential Brown Act issue, where if we wanted to get input from the entire committee, we would need to have a special meeting if we were trying to do this in advance of the DCA board meeting, if you're going to continue meeting as the SEC after the next DCA board meeting.
Great. All right. We have Lindsay and Mike Moran who have questions or comments. Lindsay?
I was going to offer a similar suggestion of doing a small group or having it being presented with 1 or 2 people. That way you get a little more diversity and it wasn't just all put on Jim's shoulders, because this would be a big undertaking, and that way you get a little more input. So that was just echoing. Those are my comments as well.
I'm hearing volunteer.
And then Mike,
I'm happy to volunteer.
That's what I heard. We got 2 there.
All right, Mike Moran.
I think, yeah, recreation would be great to be represented.
Yeah, Brown Act concern has already been answered. Do the folks envision this committee also being on a rotating basis so that all folks have a chance to become part of this process?
Up to you all.
Okay.
Good question.
What do folks think?
Do you guys want to send me an email saying I'm interested, and we'll just I'll go down the list and just form groups of 4? Does that make sense?
No, I don't think so. I think what Barbara mentioned was probably the best idea of having 4 diverse. In other words, from the north, from the south, fishing, because we all have different specialties. And so that was nice of you to do that, Nasli, but I think by putting the teams together would be a better thought. Good.
I like it.
Barbara.
Okay. Well, how about this then? At least send me you can do it yourselves as well, again, but trying to keep out of Brown Act violations. If you want to let me know if you'd like to volunteer, I can at least get your names up with the areas of specialty and where you live, and then kind of see what makes sense.
You want to have the conversation, frankly, right now, and just find consensus with 4 people. That way it's handled and everyone's kind of weighed in.
Yep.
Okay, so again, the 4 areas would be north, south, recreation, and what was the 4th? What was the 4th? Fishing.
Lindsay volunteered. She does agriculture.
That's a big one.
Okay. Yeah, ag is good.
I don't want to have to do all of them because you want to rotate people, but I really want someone in, if it isn't me, that rotates with me to work on the air pollution, water quality considerations consistently. So
well, then how about, I think that would be, since air quality will be on the agenda for May, we haven't covered that here in the presentation, but we didn't cover May's agenda here yet. We've skipped that slide. Probably have to go back to it. But anyway, I think the June board meeting might be a better meeting than for you to be on that team.
Okay. Okay. Can I bring up something else? Is there an interest in, if we at least know the agendas of the meetings a month ahead of time, depending on how we move forward, to then kind of think about the makeup of the 4, if you guys want to rotate? I don't want to make it overly complicated.
Yeah, I think we just do. We just have an agenda item where everyone kind of has perhaps this kind of conversation each month, and we just kind of get into that dynamic.
And
So
the committee can work on that one too.
Yeah,
I mean,
from the north.
Have 4 or 5 people on a steering committee, and then I'm sure that they can come to some kind of a consensus amongst themselves.
Yeah, I think right now we've got Jim and Lindsay. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I think agriculture, you're kind of quiet in these meetings too. I think it'd be a good opportunity to make sure that issues around agriculture are being represented, as that's a big part of the Delta. So we have 2, I don't know, Mike or Sean.
Mike or Sean.
somebody in the South, David?
I'm happy to, this is Karen. I'm happy
Karen?
to represent the South.
Oh, great.
And
I'm happy to join, however it helps best.
Is
There's your car.
Recreation.
That was Mike. Mike. All right, so we have Jim, Karen, Mike, and Lindsay. Does that work?
And then Peter lined up maybe for the next one on the recreation.
Peter and Barbara.
The first one is the North Delta.
I'm sorry?
The first topic is the North Delta.
No, I think we're just reporting out what process, creating a process template, and then also talking about this process, how it's been going, what it looks like, and doing so from the perspective of the committee.
And also, if there's some highlights of comments that you've had over the last sessions, I think that could easily be an agenda item as well. I think what I'll do is, I think you guys can decide on what you think is important to represent to the DCA board. Hopefully it stays within the confines, the purview of the SEC. But obviously, you know, can't control what folks say. And you guys can work that out as part of the subcommittee?
I think this first one is important because you guys are really kind of you're laying the example. I mean, obviously each group might change a bit, but you're laying the example in terms of the template. So that becomes real important for you to work that out. That's going to be kind of generalized, but really, really important.
Okay.
Douglas, you have your hand up.
Yeah. Okay, for the second board meeting,
I'm sorry,
Breaking up, Douglas.
for the
Sorry. Let's try that one more time.
Okay, for the second board meeting, maybe give a shot to the tribal, Melissa or me for heritage or tribal matter. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, excellent.
It's a great idea. Great comment.
Yeah. And Melissa and Jesus, if you share that feeling, by all means, let us know. I know Melissa was having trouble speaking, so I have some comments that I've emailed that we'll incorporate. But Melissa, if you are able to unmute or if the phone's working better, just let us know. Same with Jesus.
Okay, so just to reiterate, Jim Wallace, Karen Mann, Mike Moran, and Lindsay Liebig. Within the next day, what we'll do is we'll send over some deadlines in order to be able to prepare slides or whatever, for presentation purposes for the board meeting. And we're here to support you in whatever way. So we'll be in contact via email over the next day or two. Does that sound about right, Nasli and Catherine?
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. All right.
And then Valerie, just one more housekeeping thing. Because the subcommittees will be for a limited duration and a limited subject matter jurisdiction, they will not be subject to the Brown Act. They will be considered an ad hoc committee under the Brown Act. So meetings of that committee will not be agendized.
Okay, good point.
All right. So Sarah, we're moving on to the next item.
Okay, yeah, so here we are. I'm going to ask Mr. Rodriguez, do we have any public comments on agendized items? This is just for agendized items.
We do, Chair Palmer. We have a comment from Deidre Desjardins and OSHA Meserve.
Okay. You want to start them out?
This is Deirdre Desjardins, and I just wanted to say California Water Research represents public interest, science, and engineering. There's no spot on the Stakeholder Engagement Committee, and there's no opportunity to comment or ask questions on the individual items. There's 3 minutes is not enough to participate in this. And also, I am working with NGO that wasn't represented on the committee. So I just want to note that with this 3 minutes on the entire thing, it's pretty much completely excluding both public interest science and engineering and NGOs that aren't specifically represented by individuals on the committee. So it's not working. The Stakeholder Engagement Committee is not working as a format for that kind of participation in the design. Thank you.
Next. Claudia, would you take care of the next person, please?
Yes. OSHA?
Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Okay, great. This is Ocean Reserve. Represent local agencies up in Delta. I have my computer off, so I don't know. Oh, wait a minute.
You just turned your mic off. OSHA, you just muted yourself. OSHA, you need to unmute. There you go. Go ahead. Now
Well, I was trying to do it through my phone. So if you could, Claudia, can you unmute my phone, please? Because I don't think this computer works too well. Is it working?
Or if we can hear you just fine.
Well, I have to listen to you through the phone, and you're listening to me through the computer, so it's kind of messed up. I don't think this process is working very well. Needless to say.
Well, just continue with your comments right now, because that's all, and then you can mute yourself and listen on the phone.
Meeting, I don't think that's fair. I don't know what's going to happen throughout the meeting, and I don't know what to request. I appreciate the correction to the Stone Lakes map. That took 12 years to get. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't think that the discussion was very clear about what to do with the stakeholder process. Stakeholders should have voted on whether to continue if they actually had any say in it. Instead, they were told that if they didn't participate, continue with the meetings, that they would not be considered. And I don't think that is correct. No deadline was given. And in fact, if you look at the timeline that was presented to the DCA board, it shows the conceptual engineering done at the end of September. So I think there is time to take a break from these types of marathon phone meetings that aren't working well for people. And I would note that DWR in their May Q&A said that Delta communities would be involved in this new approach. And I don't think that this is a reasonable substitute for having real engagement. And that was in the Q&A that was handed out. So I'm disappointed in the process, and it's hard for me to participate, so I'll just end it there.
Were there any other public comments?
There are no other public comments.
Okay, then let's see. I believe at this point, we've already gone through. Part 5, item 5. So Barbara, you're going to take over for non-agendized items, I believe. Barbara Keegan. Is she here?
Actually, I'm still here, but you know what? I'll let you continue, just in the interest of time.
Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to have SEC members provide information about outreach or questions raised related to the proposed project and any other items you feel you haven't been able to bring up during this meeting. So are there other like non-agendized items from the SEC board?
I think
Claudia?
we captured it.
Yes.
Okay, we captured that already.
Anna and Philip have had their hands up. If you want to go ahead and if you guys want to handle your questions, we also have Barbara now related to this discussion, or maybe it was related to an earlier discussion. Anna?
This is for non-agendized items, remember.
Yeah, so my question is, I don't know if you guys have seen this or not, but DWR actually sent out a guideline for their participation with the project, and it very clearly states how they intend to participate with the Delta folks and the community and whatnot. And I just don't see how that's possible in the current state that we're at. So I just want to, for the record, I will be emailing you a copy of that so that it can be part of the record. But you know, there's a specific paragraph that talks about interactions with the Delta and how they're going to engage with the communities, and there's no way, as Catherine said, legally to actually do everything that states. So either DWR needs to change their guidelines and say we don't intend on having any type of engagement with anybody that doesn't have a computer connection, which is 90% of the people who live in the Delta, and we plan on moving forward, but we will provide it to anybody who does have the affluence and the money and the social stratus to be able to participate in this process. And I think that that's a really important point, because by going forward, what you're doing is, as I said before, you're locking out the people who can not afford internet in the Delta, do not have access to the internet in the Delta, and most likely are lined up for the weekly food banks that line up in the Delta because of our food desert in the middle of this global pandemic. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Okay, Philip.
Hi there, can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. So I had my hand up in the last conversation regarding—
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I join the subcommittee on heritage concerns with Douglas and the Native peoples representatives? That's where my knowledge and expertise will be most valuable.
I think it's up to the committee, and perhaps between now and the next meeting, when this group will be activated, you guys can discuss it or certify it at that point. I think these names were being tossed around, and you know, I mean, I think everyone's nodding that we can validate that and move that on at that point. But we're definitely putting you on the list, Philip, if that makes sense. Thank you for volunteering. I think that's
especially where your expertise comes in. That will be very good.
Exactly.
Okay. And how about any other?
Barbara has a comment.
So I want everyone to understand on the committee, we, of course, the NOP deadline was Friday. Out of the social justice EJ groups that we work with, really only, well, groups signed on to comments with us, but that was in March before we were all on definite shelter in place. We really only had one, maybe two groups that worked with Ag Solutions file comments independently. And the reason, you know, we're beating the dead horse about who has access and who doesn't have access. But that's what I'm still just extremely fearful of. Not only is it what's going on in the rural Delta, but most of the groups that we partner with, they have 20, 30 people showing up at their nonprofits looking for food and resources every day. So this has been incredibly stressful. And so I just want to remind people that this requires a certain humility. You can't get everyone with you to the table, I think, fast enough. And so we just really need to be cognizant. And we actually asked, because I know you said you had 800 NOP comments. We did a webinar, and I want people on this committee to understand the numbers. We did a webinar on the voluntary agreements and on the NOP. We had 150 people, which was our max capacity participate. About 25 to 30 of those people were agency people. The rest were retirees who follow us from outside of the Delta. And we asked them to work hard on comments because we knew we couldn't get to people in the Delta. And with our outreach, we could only bring in, it was like 20 or to 22 from within the Delta to participate in that effort. So one of the things that, you know, that I want to think about is that for people who live a little bit more on the better urban side, which is the Contra Costa side, You tend to be a little bit more affluent. You tend to have a little bit better access to things than we do in San Joaquin County and in the interior Delta. So I just want people to keep that in mind. You're not going to get a broad representation. So try to be sensitive and think about who isn't in the table when you prepare your report and when we work on things going forward. We could be for all the people or just for our own limited group.
Thanks, Barbara. And I think we discussed earlier when we discussed item 5 that we'll be having offline conversations just with, and you're definitely one of those folks, to see how we can be more creative about talking to the different populations. So thank you for that comment. All right, Douglas, Shia. Douglas, you are muted.
Yeah.
There you go. Still muted. I'm sorry, hon, we missed part of that. Can you repeat that? Yeah, go ahead.
Oh. Earlier we were talking about organizing a tour to the locations.
Yes.
So what is our plan for the forthcoming few weeks?
We don't know yet.
I think that's a work in progress. I think it was an idea that we were coming up. Okay. I think it's an idea we're coming up with here, and probably within the next few days, we'll have something that we can discuss with you. I know that's how Catherine works. Correct, Catherine?
Yeah, actually, if I recall this, as we were discussing this, it came up as an idea, and so you're going to see this. It will come out, but it hasn't, you know, in the last 2 hours, it hasn't gelled yet.
No, I need to find out what's legal within the counties, find out how you get one of these permissions to travel out there. So let us do a little bit of research. Josh has some homework.
All right. Anyone else? One of the things I'll mention, and this is off topic but important, and if I need clarification on this, Claudia or Jasmine, please let me know. There is a DocuSign that's going to be sent to all of you with regard to stipends. And so please be aware of that, because that's going to be your official sign-in this time. Is that correct, Claudia or Jasmine?
Yes, that's correct. So we will have that process through DocuSign. So you won't get an actual email from one of us. It'll come through DocuSign. So please make sure, if you don't get something in the next day or two, please make sure to check your spam. And if you don't receive anything, please feel free to reach out to me directly, and I will ensure that you get your form.
Terrific. Okay, Sarah, next item.
Okay, yeah, next item is public comment on non-agendized item. This is non-agendized item. Remember, you're going to be given 3 minutes. I know you don't like it, but you can be given 3 minutes, and we can't comment on what you talk about at that point. Okay, so go ahead.
This is public comment, correct?
Public comment on non-agendized items.
And so that's you, Claudia.
Yep, so we have 2 comments. We have Deidre Desjardins and Osha Meserve.
Hi, this is Deirdre Desjardins, and I sent a letter to the stakeholder engagement committee members. We worked with our council, Gwen Pratt, and we requested that everybody clarify with the DCA exactly which Delta stakeholder organizations they have an agreement to represent. We have a legal memo. The DCA does not have the authority to appoint or remove representatives for classes of Delta stakeholders. There was this has been a source of ongoing confusion, and there was something in the application where you check the box saying, I represent these stakeholders, but that was confusion, and there's continuing reference to constituents. It is a misstatement by the DCA to call people constituents. You don't represent somebody unless you have an agreement with them directly to represent them. As far as liaisons, It's very clear that plans have changed. You know, everybody had a plan in their application for outreach. Obviously, it's changed, and we're requesting that members clarify who they're actually able to liaison with. And it's important to the extent that you're negotiating about mitigation of very real impacts on property and people, that you be clear about who you're representing with the committee, and the DCA also needs to be clear about this. And we hope that this will clear up issues about the committee does not represent the entire Delta. It just can't, and it particularly can't during the pandemic. So thank you very much. And I did send a memo to the public members and to the chair.
Thank you. Okay, our next comment, please.
It appears that OSHA Reserve has dropped off the call.
Okay, so that's it for public comment on non-agendized items. Anything else?
Just the next meeting component. Again, if we can have that slide. Again, we're anticipating an online meeting 3 to 6, May 27th. Here's the agenda items as we see it at this point. This is what Catherine talked about previously. Again, we're eager to hear from you as well if you have some strong thoughts about things that should be discussed moving forward.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, so I believe we're now getting ready to adjourn. I did want to say that, that we've had some really useful input today. I appreciate some of your more inventive ideas. I mean, it's really good that we've got some nice ideas coming out of you. Also, they will be entered into the record, into the report. I'm looking forward to hearing, we're all looking forward to hearing from the steering committee folks. And your questions will be addressed as discussed, during the meeting, and they will become part of the record. And I know that we talked about having the answers to some of your past questions put forth there. So I wanted to make sure that you email Claudia if you have other things that you want to have brought up. And so then, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
This is Barbara Keegan. May I just say a few words before you?
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead, Barbara.
Thank you so much. So first, very spirited discussion, and I really enjoyed listening to everyone and all your comments, and also really appreciated everyone's participation. And I also would like to say a big thanks to the staff that's supporting this committee. It was a lot of work to try and pull something together like this, and personally, I appreciate it very much. So thank you.
Very good. No, you're absolutely right. Okay, so thank you all for participating, and I want to wish you all good luck and good health in the next while. And please take care of yourself and you and yours during this time. And other than that, we stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Take care. Goodbye.
Bye, guys. Take care.